The first impression of a tropical shoreline is always a lie. Warm waves roll in gently, pale and harmless as liquid glass, and beneath them the sand shifts with the lazy rhythm of a living lung. Light scatters into hazy gold ribbons, blurring everything into softness, and the water appears clean enough to drink. It is here, in this gentle quiet, where one of the most efficient killing mechanisms on Earth drifts almost unseen. The box jellyfish does not perform the theatrics expected of a deadly marine predator. There is no flash of teeth, no thrashing silhouette, no warning shape in the water. Instead, it hovers just below the surface like a fragment of the sea itself, a nearly perfect optical ghost suspended by threads so fine they could be mistaken for strands of drifting light. From a distance, there is absolutely nothing to fear, and that is exactly how the animal hunts. To meet a box jellyfish is not to see one. It is to feel it only after it has already decided the encounter is over. Those who have survived its sting describe the moment not as pain, but as punishment. The tentacles, which look like faint, translucent hairs in the water, carry thousands of microscopic harpoons packed into structures called nematocysts. When these hair-thin threads brush against skin, even for the briefest instant, entire batteries of nematocysts fire in perfect unison. It happens in less than a heartbeat. Each harpoon penetrates the outer layer of cells, injecting venom that begins attacking the body on multiple fronts at once. The sensation is immediate. A blistering surge that feels like acid has been poured across the skin. There is no gradual build-up, no small warning that something toxic is happening. Instead, the burn spreads outward in branching streaks, almost like veins of molten metal crawling across the flesh, and victims often describe the feeling as if their nerves have turned into live electrical wires. The shock is so overwhelming that many never make it back to shore. Swimmers simply collapse in the water, unable to breathe or swim, and the quiet sea swallows them before anyone realizes why. The danger comes from invisibility, as much as from potency. Box jellyfish tentacles are nearly transparent and hang in lines that can stretch longer than the length of a human body. In shallow water, where suspended sand turns the sea milky, these threads vanish completely. Even in perfectly clear conditions, the animal refracts light so well that it becomes little more than a shimmer. A human eye scanning for obvious movement is hopelessly mismatched against an organism shaped by evolutionary pressure to be almost undetectable. The jellyfish does not need camouflage. Its entire structure is already built from the same optical properties as seawater. It is the predator equivalent of a ghost convoy drifting through the shallows, armed with weapons that trigger not from intent, but from touch. This creates an ecological paradox. One of the world's deadliest marine hunters survives by being almost completely overlooked. The venom itself is a biological masterclass in efficiency. Unlike many toxins that rely on paralysis or metabolic collapse over extended periods, box jellyfish venom acts with terrifying speed. Once the microscopic harpoons discharge, the venom begins punching holes through cell membranes. This breach floods the inside of the cell with ions, water, and other molecules it cannot regulate. Cells rupture one after another, turning entire patches of tissue into raw, blistered landscapes. Simultaneously, the venom hijacks nerve channels, scrambling signals so violently that the brain receives a cascade of false alarms. Muscles contract so hard that victims often describe an immediate inability to move or breathe. Even more devastating is what happens inside the cardiovascular system. The venom creates chaos in the electrical rhythm of the heart. With ion channels disrupted, the heart stutters, spasms, and can enter fatal arrhythmia within minutes. This is why medical intervention is difficult. The timeline between sting and systemic collapse is brutally short. Yet for the jellyfish, this venom is not designed for humans. It evolved for capture and digestion of prey that are fast, delicate, and often much smaller. Tiny fish, darting through warm coastal nurseries, rely on speed to escape threats. The box jellyfish counters that by ensuring escape is never an option. As soon as a fish brushes a tentacle, its muscles seize into full contraction. The sudden rigidity strips it of any ability to swim, turning motion into involuntary twitching bursts that only entangle it further. The tentacles then begin their mechanical retrieval, shortening in coordinated movements to pull the immobilized prey toward the central bell. The fish's body, locked in permanent muscular spasm, offers no resistance. The venom has already ensured that the internal organs are failing, and by the time the jellyfish envelops the prey, digestion has almost begun at the cellular level. This entire system makes the box jellyfish a ruthless gatekeeper of coastal ecosystems. The shallow nurseries where juvenile fish shelter are crowded, competitive, and vulnerable. Countless species use these warm zones to reproduce, feed, and grow before venturing into deeper water. Any individual that hesitates, moves sluggishly, or misjudges the presence of a drifting tentacle becomes part of the jellyfish's invisible harvest. In this way, box jellyfish act as unforgiving biological filters. They remove the weak, the injured, the slow, and the unlucky before those fish can mature and contribute inferior traits to future generations. It is natural selection conducted not through pursuit or ambush, but through passive drift and molecular violence. Every tentacle becomes a fine sieve that decides which fish pass into adulthood and which are erased from the coastal population. The presence of box jellyfish also shapes behavior. Fish learn to avoid certain water conditions, swim in coordinated schools for increased detection of transparent threats, and instinctively avoid bright, calm shallows that seem deceptively safe to humans. Some species adjust breeding cycles to align offspring development with seasons when jellyfish numbers dip. Others migrate earlier or later to avoid contact. The jellyfish, however, continues its slow patrol without awareness of how much influence it exerts. It is not a predator in the traditional sense. It does not chase, stalk, or strategize. Instead, it drifts in the interface zone where sunlight meets sediment, where the boundaries blur, and where its transparency becomes absolute advantage. Even its anatomy contributes to its lethality. Unlike most jellyfish, box jellyfish have simple but functional eyes arranged in clusters. These are not eyes that see detail, but they detect light and shadow well enough for the animal to orient itself. This allows the jellyfish to avoid obstacles, maintain position in currents, and navigate its hunting grounds with surprising control. Combined with a body that contracts rhythmically for purposeful swimming, it becomes more than a drifting hazard. It is an active participant in its hunt. The box shape of its bell creates efficient propulsion, and this mobility lets it patrol rich areas where juvenile fish gather in dense numbers. It moves silently through these nurseries like a phantom boundary between safety and elimination. The ecological balance that results is harsh but necessary. Without box jellyfish, coastal nurseries would overflow with fish that are poorly equipped to survive adulthood. Predators farther offshore would face irregular prey populations. Algae and plankton blooms would flare unpredictably when herbivorous fish numbers became unstable. In other words, the box jellyfish's invisible presence prevents ecological chaos. It trims the population with unflinching precision, ensuring that the individuals who reach open water are stronger, faster, and more capable of surviving the pressures of the sea. There is no malice in the sting, no cruelty in the venom. The box jellyfish is simply a mechanism perfected by millions of years of steady refinement. Its weaponry is efficient because inefficiency would mean starvation. Its invisibility is not a strategy, but a byproduct of the same materials that compose seawater. And its reputation as a heart-stopping killer is not a myth, but an accidental consequence of humans entering ecosystems where transparency and softness hide unimaginable lethality. The box jellyfish is the ocean's quiet reminder that danger does not always roar or charge. Sometimes it drifts gently beneath the surface, waiting for contact measured in fractions of a second. In the end, the box jellyfish's role is as clear as its body. It enforces order through elimination. It strips away the illusion of safety in tropical shallows. It polices the boundary between life that is ready for the ocean and life that is not. And though it remains almost invisible, its influence shapes every creature that dares to grow up in these warm coastal waters. It is a heartstopper, a mythmaker, and a silent architect of marine survival, all contained within a shimmering body light enough to float yet strong enough to pull entire populations into evolutionary alignment. The reef always feels crowded, a place where everything is stacked on top of everything else, alive in every direction. Fish push through the water like quick flashes of metal, crustaceans clatter across rock, and the coral itself thrums with the slow pulse of a living fortress. But down in the cracks, where light thins into darkness and the water becomes still enough for sand to settle, the noise fades. These are the corridors and crawl spaces of the reef, the tight, windless caverns where larger hunters struggle to maneuver and where prey flee with instinctive precision. Into these narrow arteries slips a creature evolved to dominate what most predators cannot even enter. A sea snake moves through these gaps like a ribbon of living mercury, its body bending with impossible fluidity. Its presence is not introduced by sound or by shadow. It simply glides into a crevice, scales whispering against coral, head steady, tongue tasting faint traces of fish and eel hidden deep in the structure. Here, speed means nothing. In these tight confines, a fleeing fish has inches to work with, not meters. A startled eel can vanish behind a curtain of coral spines faster than a predator can lunge. But the sea snake is not a chaser. It belongs to a very different category of hunter, one adapted to fight its battles in spaces where motion is restricted and clarity is low. Its primary weapon is not force, nor is it pursuit. It is the ability to end the struggle instantly by shutting down the nervous system of its prey. Many species of sea snake possess venom that surpasses the potency of even the most dangerous terrestrial cobras. The chemistry is not meant for dramatic showdowns. It is designed for surgical precision. When a sea snake strikes inside a narrow reef chamber, it must prevent its victim from thrashing, fleeing, or wedging itself somewhere unreachable. Paralysis must be immediate, absolute, and predictable. Watching a sea snake thread itself into a coral labyrinth is like studying a river folding through stone. The animal's lungs stretch along almost the entire length of its body, giving it the buoyancy control needed to hover effortlessly in the water column, yet also allowing it to compress when diving into tighter pockets. Its paddle-shaped tail moves with slow, deliberate strokes, providing just enough thrust to shift forward without stirring debris or alerting prey. The head, small and rounded, carries an expression of quiet intent. There is no aggression in the movements, no wasted energy. This is an animal built to hunt, where space closes down into tunnels no larger than a clenched fist. Once the snake detects the faint electrical signature of a fish or the dusty scent trail of an eel, it freezes. Even in the cramped space, the stillness is perfect. Then, with a short, direct movement, it bites. Sea snake fangs are not large, curved weapons like those of vipers. Instead, they are short, sharply pointed hypodermic needles built for fast penetration and precision delivery. The venom dose is tiny, often a fraction of what a land cobra might deliver, but the chemistry is astonishingly potent. The neurotoxins begin locking up nerve channels almost instantly, blocking the signals that allow muscles to contract in coordinated patterns. Within seconds, the prey's body loses control. The eel or fish stiffens, shudders, and then falls into total paralysis, drifting like a limp leaf in the water. The reason for this extreme potency lies in the physics of the environment. When a prey animal dies in open water, there is space for it to fall free. But inside the reef, prey rarely dies in open space. It wedges itself into corners, behind coral pillars, under ledges where no predator can reach. Any delay, even a matter of heartbeats, allows the prey to escape simply by virtue of its environment. A hunting sea snake must ensure that the victim cannot move, cannot twist, cannot retreat even the smallest distance. The venom evolved to override every muscle group immediately, collapsing the prey's resistance in the time it takes for the snake to withdraw its fangs. Because the venom is so concentrated, the amount injected is incredibly small. This is why sea snake bites on humans, though rare, can be catastrophic. The animal does not usually target humans. It prefers prey. It can swallow whole, and humans do not fit that category. Most accidents occur when fishermen haul in nets and trap a snake against the mesh, or when divers reach blindly into coral without realizing what they are disturbing. When a bite does occur, it is often painless at first, the puncture wounds so small they resemble scratches from a thorn. But the venom begins its work almost immediately. The neurotoxic components bind to junctions in the nervous system, disrupting the signals that allow muscle fibers to respond. Early symptoms appear as weakness, difficulty lifting arms or legs, and a creeping heaviness in the chest. Without antivenom or medical intervention, the paralysis can spread inward until even the muscles that control breathing fail. Yet for all their reputation, sea snakes remain some of the least aggressive venomous animals on the planet. They rely on stealth, not confrontation. Their bodies are too slender and their mouths too small to waste energy on unnecessary conflict. When confronted by humans, they usually try to escape upward or retreat into the reef. The danger comes only from misunderstanding, a hand reaching where it should not, a foot stepping on sand where a snake lies buried beneath the surface. The catastrophic potential exists, but it is rarely realized. In their underwater realm, sea snakes play a very different role. They operate as regulators in the reef's dense, competitive world. Many of the fish they target are species that hide deep within coral cavities. These fish are not easily hunted by larger predators such as groupers or reef sharks. Their ability to vanish into tight crevices gives them a survival advantage that, without counterbalance, could reshape the reef's ecological dynamics. Sea snakes prevent that imbalance. They patrol the spaces other hunters cannot reach, thinning populations of reef fish and eels that would otherwise grow beyond sustainable limits. Their hunting strategy forces prey species to develop unique defensive behaviors. Some fish adopt glass-like coloration to blend with the dim light filtering through coral. Others develop rapid darting escape patterns specifically designed to navigate their maze-like shelters. Even eels, which already possess speed and flexibility, show heightened sensitivity to vibration and chemical cues, bolstering their awareness of incoming threats. The sea snake, however, adapts just as quickly. Its sense of smell is refined enough to differentiate minute chemical signatures drifting from prey. It can detect the faint movement of water displaced by gills or a flicking tail. And its vision, though adapted to low-light conditions, is sharp enough to read micro-movements in the narrow glow of filtered sunlight. Internal adaptations complete the picture. Sea snakes possess the ability to extract oxygen from seawater through their skin, allowing them to remain submerged longer than most reptiles should physiologically be able to. This is crucial inside reef structures where escape routes are limited. A snake that must surface too often would lose hunting opportunities and expose itself to predators. By blending respiratory strategies, lung capacity, skin respiration, and efficient oxygen conservation, sea snakes maintain a perfect balance between mobility and endurance. Their presence shapes not just prey behavior, but the entire architecture of reef life. When sea snake populations are healthy, the reef experiences reduced pressure on small crustaceans and juvenile fish that compete for space and shelter. When snakes decline, certain reef fish expand rapidly, grazing essential algae or dominating refuge spaces, which can upset coral growth and reduce biodiversity. In this way, sea snakes maintain a kind of hidden order. They influence what species thrive, which behaviors are reinforced, and how the ecosystem stabilizes under constant competitive pressure. Despite their lethal venom and formidable hunting ability, sea snakes face their own vulnerabilities. Many species are susceptible to habitat loss, pollution, and rising ocean temperatures. The same tight crevices that provide ideal hunting grounds also trap pollutants and sediments. As coral ecosystems decline, the spaces sea snakes rely on shrink. Breeding sites disappear. Prey populations shift or decline. The animals, perfectly adapted to a narrow ecological niche, are now confronted with rapid environmental changes they cannot evade simply by slipping into another crevice. Yet in the wild, undisturbed reefs, sea snakes still perform with ancient precision. Watching one glide out of a shadowed crack, prey dangling lifeless in its jaws, reveals a predator that has mastered a world most animals cannot enter. Its venom is not a blunt instrument, but a finely tuned evolutionary solution to the challenges of hunting in confinement. Its movements are not frantic, but measured, a choreography refined over countless generations. And its presence is essential to the hidden balance of life where coral folds into darkness. The sea snake's power does not come from aggression. It comes from control over its environment, its prey, and the microscopic chemistry that can end a life before the struggle even begins. In the tight spaces of the reef, this control makes the snake not just a participant, but a silent ruler of the maze, enforcing balance through paralysis delivered with the smallest, most efficient weaponry the ocean has engineered. The seafloor in the shallows looks harmless from above, a patchwork of pale sand and scattered rubble, broken only by the occasional flick of a darting goby or the shadow of a drifting piece of seaweed. Sunlight hits the bottom in wavering bands, flattening everything into a uniform softness. But this sense of calm is one of the ocean's most deceptive illusions. Below the surface lies a minefield of living traps so perfectly camouflaged that even experienced divers can hover above them without recognizing a single shape. Among these traps is the stonefish, a creature that does not simply blend into its environment, but disappears into it so completely that even predators with refined sensory systems struggle to detect it. The stonefish is the embodiment of stillness turned into defense, an animal whose best survival strategy is to become indistinguishable from the terrain it rests upon. Stonefish bury themselves in shallow sand, gently fluttering their fins to pull fine grains of sediment over their backs until they are nothing more than a slightly raised bump in the seafloor. Their skin, mottled with browns, greys, mossy greens, and rusty oranges, resembles broken coral encrusted with algae. Small protrusions, like worn barnacles or coral polyps, jut from their heads and bodies. These structures make them appear aged, as if they are fragments of the reef that time has forgotten. Even their eyes, set high and forward, catch light in peculiar ways, flickering like grains of sand instead of giving away a living gaze. Everything about their presence is engineered toward deception. They are so convincing that small fish sometimes rest directly on their bodies, unaware that the rock beneath them is watching. Because the stonefish does not move unless it must. It is among the most patient predators in the ocean, often remaining in the same place for hours or even days. Its mouth is a cavernous trap, built not for chewing, but for explosive suction. When a small fish ventures too close, the stonefish snaps its jaws open, in a motion so fast that the water itself seems to vanish into the vacuum. Prey is swallowed whole before it even realizes the rock was alive. The entire action lasts less than the blink of an eye, a perfect ambush executed without venom, struggle, or pursuit. This is why stonefish venom exists for a different purpose entirely. It is not needed for feeding. It is needed for surviving the chaos of a world where stepping on the wrong patch of sand can trigger a defensive response of unbelievable severity. Along the stonefish's back lie a series of dorsal spines, each one connected to venom glands that operate much like biological syringes. When pressure is applied, typically by the foot of an animal or an unlucky human, the spines drive upward through the skin of the aggressor. The force compresses the venom glands at the base of each spine, injecting toxin through hollow channels directly into the tissue. The system is mechanically straightforward, yet terrifyingly efficient. The spines themselves are rigid and incredibly sharp, capable of punching through wetsuits, thick skin, or even protective footwear. Once the venom enters the body, it begins working almost immediately. The pain is indescribable to those who have not experienced it. Survivors compare it to having boiling metal infused into the foot, or having nerves set on fire one by one. The agony spreads up the limb, accompanied by swelling so rapid and intense that the entire foot can balloon in minutes. Tissue begins to deteriorate as the venom disrupts cellular membranes and blood flow. The shock can cause fainting, vomiting, and severe systemic stress. In extreme cases, especially with multiple spine punctures, the cardiovascular system may falter, leading to collapse or even death. The venom contains potent neurotoxins and cytotoxins that attack the nervous and muscular systems with an intensity difficult to imagine without witnessing its effects firsthand. Yet for all its severity, The stonefish's venom is not an offensive tool. The animal does not hunt with it. It does not rely on it to immobilize prey or intimidate rivals. Instead, this venom exists because the stonefish is among the most vulnerable of ambush predators. Its immobility makes it susceptible to being stepped on, crushed, or bitten by animals moving across the sea floor. To compensate for its lack of speed or escapability, evolution granted it a weapon so punishing that predators learn very quickly to avoid repeating their mistakes. Sharks that attempt to bite stonefish often recoil instantly when the spines pierce their mouths. Turtles that test the rock-like shape with their beaks or front flippers retreat after receiving even minor venom exposure. Rays that glide across the bottom may brush a spine and flee with desperate whipping strokes of their wings. The stonefish turns a passive lifestyle into survivability through overwhelming retaliation. Even humans, the dominant creatures of shallow coastlines, often learn this lesson only after tragedy. Many incidents occur in ankle-deep water and often involve individuals walking across sandy flats without protective footwear. A step placed on the wrong patch of sand delivers an explosion of pain so sudden that victims frequently collapse. What follows is a race against the venom as swelling intensifies and shock sets in. Traditional first aid methods, such as hot water immersion, work because heat helps break down certain components of the venom, but the relief is partial and temporary. Without medical intervention, complications can escalate rapidly. Yet despite the risk, stonefish do not seek confrontation. The animal is a reluctant participant in human injury. It relies on camouflage to avoid disturbance in the first place, not venom to initiate conflict. This defensive strategy has shaped its relationships within the ecosystem. Predators that survive a sting avoid stonefish shapes entirely afterward. Over generations, this avoidance patterns ripple across species. Juvenile sharks are often seen reacting with sudden withdrawal when approaching rock-like objects that give off the faintest hint of chemical cues associated with stonefish. Green turtles, normally fearless grazers that forage across seagrass and sandy bottoms, modify their movement patterns in regions where stonefish densities are high, lifting their flippers higher than usual and placing them down with a peculiar delicacy. Even large rays, which often remain indifferent to most benthic animals, adjust their flight paths to avoid patches of sand that contain irregular, semi-rounded shapes. This fearsome reputation protects the stonefish far more effectively than mobility ever could. Ecologically, the stonefish's role is unusual for a venomous animal. It is not a keystone predator that actively regulates populations through hunting. Instead, it acts as a subtle modulator of space usage along the seafloor. Many fish species avoid certain areas entirely if stonefish are present, giving space and resources to smaller or more agile organisms. Certain shrimp and small benthic fish, which can detect faint chemical signatures from stonefish, navigate around their territories with surprising precision. This avoidance behavior creates microzones of reduced foraging pressure, allowing small crustaceans, worms, and juvenile fish species to thrive in pockets that would otherwise be heavily contested. Even the stonefish's ambush method shapes the reef environment. Because they remove small fish that stray too close to their resting spots, they subtly influence the distribution of herbivores and micro-predators. This affects algae growth, coral recruitment, and even the movement patterns of mid-level predators that rely on small fish for food. In this way, the stonefish becomes an unintentional architect of seafloor behavior, carving out zones of caution and fostering patches of biodiversity, simply by existing where it does. The venom, for all its danger, is a reminder of how evolution crafts defense mechanisms not through intention, but through necessity. An animal that looks like a rock and barely moves is an easy target for anything that walks, crawls, or glides across the bottom. The spines protect the stonefish not by disabling a predator's hunting ability, but by engraving a memory of unbearable pain that prevents future attacks. Across tropical reefs and sandy flats, generations of marine animals have learned one lesson with near-universal consistency. Never assume the ground is safe. For humans, the lesson is equally important, but often learned the hard way. The stonefish's reputation as the world's most venomous fish is not an exaggeration. But it is also not a sign of aggression or malice. It It is simply a defense built to survive an environment full of creatures larger, faster, and more powerful than itself. Those who understand this treat stonefish not as villains, but as remarkable examples of how evolution solves problems through extremes. In the calm shallows where waves lap gently and children play, the stonefish waits without intention, buried beneath a thin veil of sand. It is not there to harm anyone. It is waiting for small prey to make a fatal mistake, or for an unwary predator to be taught the harshest biological lesson that the ocean offers. The minefield is silent, unmoving, and almost invisible. Yet its presence controls the behavior of creatures far beyond its size. This is the paradox of the stonefish. A creature shaped not by predatory ambition, but by the unyielding need to remain alive in a world where invisibility and agony form the foundations of survival. Reefs often appear like living kaleidoscopes, shifting mosaics of motion and color that make it difficult for the human eye to settle on any single creature. Among the flickering schools of fish, the gliding rays, and the slow sway of coral fans, one animal commands attention without ever moving fast. It drifts through the water like a fragment of an elaborate tapestry torn free, its fins unfurling in slow, radiant sheets that catch the sunlight and scatter it in thin, shimmering lines. The lionfish is not a creature that hides from the viewer. It is a creature that demands to be seen, yet somehow remains far more dangerous than any predator that charges or lunges. The beauty is not a mask, it is the weapon. Every stripe, every feathered fin, and every elegant glide is built around a central truth. Predators learn quickly to avoid anything this gorgeous. At first glance, the lionfish seems almost too delicate to pose any threat. Its long pectoral fins flare outward like the wings of a ceremonial dancer, marked with alternating bands of deep red, ivory, and chocolate brown. Its dorsal spines rise in a row along its back, perfectly spaced like the quills of a mythical creature, and its eyes, glossy and forward-facing, shine from beneath curved brow ridges that make the fish look almost thoughtful. It glides rather than swims, moving with such slow confidence that observers might assume it is incapable of urgency. But beneath this elegance lies one of the most effective defensive arsenals in the reef. Along the lionfish's back, belly, and sides stretch an array of venomous spines, each one a hollow needle connected to venom glands embedded beneath the skin. These spines do not strike like the fangs of a snake or the sting of a jellyfish. Instead, they serve as an array of pressurized weapons that require only contact. A predator that attempts to swallow, grab, or bite the lionfish receives a dose of venom delivered directly into the tissue. The effect is immediate and unforgettable. The pain begins as a deep, throbbing pulse, then spreads outward like a fire lit inside the flesh. Victims often experience swelling, sweating, nausea, and localized paralysis, severe enough that even large animals, sharks, groupers, and rays, learn quickly to abandon their attack. This venom is the lionfish's shield, a biological banner that allows it to swim openly through crowded environments most ambush predators avoid. While many reef fish survive by blending into coral or darting among crevices, the lionfish thrives on visibility. It moves through high-traffic corridors without needing to hide, its fins forming a visual obstacle that few predators dare approach. The slow, elegant movement is not for show. It is a signal, a warning, written in stripes. Predators who ignore that message learn through agony that beauty can be fatal. Unlike the stonefish, whose venom evolved primarily as a defensive response to being stepped on or bitten, lionfish venom is part of a more layered strategy. It is not used to subdue prey. It is not needed to hunt. Instead, it allows the lionfish to shape its environment without fear. Free from predation, lionfish can afford to be selective, patient, and precise hunters, using their large fins to herd small fish and crustaceans into corners before striking with lightning speed. The prey are swallowed whole, stunned not by venom, but by the sudden collapse of space around them. The lionfish's ability to trap prey with its body shape is as effective as any active pursuit. And because its armor protects it from retaliation, it rarely needs to retreat. In its native territories of the Indo-Pacific, the lionfish exists within a system of checks. Reef predators learn its venomous pattern during early life stages, and prey species evolve escape behaviors that help them avoid its patient approach. Coral structures, currents, and the natural diversity of predators all help balance lionfish populations. Here, the lionfish is dangerous but contained, lethal but integrated, beautiful but expected. Every component of the ecosystem is familiar with the rules the lionfish follows, and over generations those rules shape predator memory, prey instincts, and even coral microhabitats. But in the Western Atlantic, where lionfish were introduced by human error, none of these evolutionary agreements exist. Here, the beauty becomes catastrophic. The lionfish's slow, mesmerizing movement remains the same, but the fish and crustaceans it hunts do not recognize it as a threat. They do not scatter, they do not hide, and they do not recognize the wide pectoral fins as the herding barrier they are. As a result, the lionfish moves through these reefs like an aristocrat strolling through a feast hall where no guest has yet realized they are prey. Juvenile fish, vital to reef replenishment, become easy targets, picked off with mechanical regularity. The venom plays a different ecological role here than in its native range. In places like the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico, predatory fish that might learn to associate the coloration of the lionfish with pain often never get the chance. Many of these predators are naturally cautious around unfamiliar shapes, but curiosity is punished swiftly. A single attempt to bite a lionfish can leave a predator incapacitated long enough to starve or become victim to its own hunters. The pain is severe enough that sharks retreat instantly, rays bolt upward, and groupers, typically bold hunters, shake and twist their heads violently before fleeing. Even large moray eels, which often dominate narrow reef passages, avoid lionfish with sudden jerking motions as if recoiling from an electric shock. This fear creates a vacuum in the ecosystem. Without predators willing to challenge them, lionfish populations explode, and their impact cascades through every level of reef life. Juvenile parrotfish, wrasses, snappers, and countless other species vanish from affected sites. With fewer herbivores grazing algae, coral becomes smothered, losing sunlight and oxygen. Without small prey fish, mid-level predators decline. Without these predators, larger species struggle to find food. The lionfish, shielded by venom and empowered by the naivete of foreign ecosystems, becomes a slow-moving, beautifully striped destroyer of balance. Yet despite their impact, lionfish do not behave with aggression or malice. Their hunting strategy is slow, deliberate, and surprisingly passive. They rely on patience, camouflage through movement, and the deceptive softness of their fins to guide prey into range. Their success comes from the mismatch between their adaptations and the vulnerabilities of ecosystems unprepared for them. In the Indo-Pacific, this strategy fits neatly into established dynamics. In the Atlantic and Caribbean, it becomes a relentless consumer, a predator without natural boundaries. At the biological level, lionfish venom is a complex mixture of proteins that target the nervous system and cell membranes. The sting often causes waves of throbbing pain, swelling that can immobilize entire limbs, and skin so tender that even gentle contact is unbearable. Some victims experience difficulty breathing or systemic shock. While fatalities are rare, the pain is severe enough to require medical treatment. Divers who accidentally brush a lionfish spine describe the sensation as if their entire hand or foot is being crushed in a vice that tightens with every heartbeat. This level of deterrence ensures that few animals, including humans, attempt to handle lionfish twice. What sets the lionfish apart from other venomous species is the synergy between its elegance and its defenses. Beauty in the ocean often accompanies fragility. Bright colors and ornate shapes usually signal vulnerability, relying on camouflage or rapid escape to avoid predation. The lionfish subverts that expectation. Its striking patterns are not a lure to attract mates or confuse predators, but a declaration of dominance. The stripes warn, the fins intimidate, and the spines enforce those warnings with absolute authority. In the places where lionfish belong, this rule keeps order. In the places where lionfish do not belong, the rule spreads unchecked, transforming entire communities into landscapes of silence and absence. The beauty becomes an ecological weapon more potent than its venom. Even so, the lionfish is not a villain crafted by malice. It is a masterpiece of evolution functioning exactly as it was designed. Its elegance is a survival strategy, its venom a shield forged by natural pressures, and its role in the ecosystem, native or invasive, is shaped entirely by context. As it glides through the reefs, fins spreading like stained glass wings, it embodies one of nature's most paradoxical truths. Sometimes the deadliest creatures are not the fastest, the strongest or the loudest, but the most beautiful. And in the quiet corridors of coral, where light flickers in thin columns and the water holds its breath, the lionfish rules through a combination of grace and agony, leaving behind a legacy carved not by violence, but by the exquisite danger of existing without fear. The reef at sunrise has a particular softness to it, a moment before the water warms when the entire world seems to hold its breath. Small fish begin their first cautious movements between coral branches, crustaceans emerge from nighttime burrows, and the water carries a faint shimmer of suspended sand that catches the early light. In this calm, beneath the shadows of larger hunters, drifts one of the strangest silhouettes in the ocean. Round, slow, and unhurried, the pufferfish moves with an innocence that feels almost comical among such streamlined predators. It does not glide with the sweeping grace of a lionfish or the precise undulation of a sea snake. Instead, it wiggles through the water, propelled by tiny fins that flutter like scraps of fabric caught in a breeze. Its eyes are large and expressive, its movements hesitant, as if it were exploring the reef for the first time every single day. It is exactly this softness, this round awkwardness, that makes the pufferfish's defenses so shocking. Within its tissues lies one of the most potent biological weapons on Earth, a toxin so devastating that even minute amounts can shut down the human nervous system with frightening efficiency. Tetrodotoxin, the compound that has earned the pufferfish its near-mythic reputation, is a molecule engineered not for attack, but for denial. It does not burn like a jellyfish sting or cause swelling like a stonefish venom. It does not induce throbbing agony or create immediate shock. Instead, it brings an eerie, creeping numbness that begins at the lips and fingertips and then works its way inward until the victim cannot breathe at all. To understand why evolution armed such an unassuming creature with something so catastrophic requires looking at how pufferfish live. They are not fast, not strong, and not capable of sudden escape. Their small fins provide little thrust, and their bodies are rounded rather than streamlined. When danger approaches, they do not dart behind rocks or slip into narrow gaps in the reef. Their strategy is to become undesirable, not unreachable. Their primary physical defense, filling their stomachs with water to inflate into a spiked balloon, is familiar to anyone who has seen them portrayed in illustrations or nature films. But the inflation is merely the first line of defense. The true deterrent lies hidden beneath the skin, in the liver, the ovaries, and other organs, where bacteria living symbiotically within the pufferfish produce tetrodotoxin in concentrations strong enough to be lethal to most predators. The mechanism of this toxin is elegantly simple. Tetrodotoxin blocks sodium channels in nerve cells, preventing them from sending signals to muscles. Without sodium flowing through these channels, muscles cannot contract. Paralysis spreads from the extremities inward. First the lips tingle, then the fingers, then the limbs. The sensation is not painful. It is eerily quiet, a gradual fading of control. Eventually, the diaphragm becomes paralyzed, and the victim cannot draw a breath, even though they remain conscious until the final moments. This quiet, creeping onset is why tetrodotoxin is so feared and why predators learn almost instantly to avoid pufferfish. When a young predator bites its first pufferfish, the reaction is almost universal. The moment tetrodotoxin touches the sensitive tissues inside the mouth, numbness begins. The predator spits the pufferfish out violently, shaking its head or scraping its jaws on the seafloor as if trying to rid itself of an invisible sting. Even a bite that draws no blood and causes no pain can deliver enough toxin to teach a lasting lesson. Within minutes, the predator's lips and tongue begin to feel distant. Its sense of taste fades, and muscles in the throat weaken. The effect may pass without lasting harm, but the association is carved deeply. The pufferfish becomes a swimming warning sign, round, awkward, brightly patterned, and unmistakable. Predators who survive a first taste rarely attempt a second. This chemical defense transforms the pufferfish's behavior. While many small reef fish stay pressed close to coral heads, darting in and out of structure with every shift of shadow, the pufferfish moves calmly across open patches of sand and rubble. It does not need shelter from larger predators because the very act of biting it could be fatal. In ecological terms, its toxin creates a zone of personal space that no other small fish of similar size could maintain. It becomes a mobile exclusion zone, a creature that carries the equivalent of a "do not touch" sign written in biochemical warning script. The relationship between pufferfish and tetrodotoxin is not straightforward. The fish themselves do not produce the toxin, rather the bacteria that colonize their tissues synthesize it. These bacteria enter pufferfish through the food they eat, small crustaceans, algae, and detritus that harbor themicrobial communities responsible for producing the toxin. Over evolutionary time, the fish and bacteria have formed a mutualistic relationship. The bacteria gain a stable environment and reliable nutrient flow, while the fish gain an unmistakable chemical shield. Without the bacteria, captive pufferfish gradually lose their toxicity, demonstrating how tightly their defense mechanism depends on environmental interactions. In the ocean, this chemical defense plays a significant ecological role. Tetrodotoxin ensures that pufferfish populations remain relatively stable, with predation pressure kept low. As a result, pufferfish can inhabit areas where other small fish might face constant threat. They graze algae, nibble on invertebrates, and explore barren patches where few fish dare to linger. Their presence shapes the foraging patterns of other species. Predators avoid areas with high pufferfish density, shifting their patrol routes accordingly. This creates pockets of the reef where grazing pressure is relaxed, allowing algae growth and small invertebrate populations to fluctuate in ways they would not in a predator-dominated zone. Despite its lethality, tetrodotoxin has become intertwined with human culture, particularly in Japan, where pufferfish, known as fugu, are considered a high-risk delicacy. Preparing fugu requires rigorous training. Chefs must remove every organ and tissue that contains dangerous levels of toxin, trimming away microscopic traces until the flesh is safe to eat. The margin of error is razor thin. A small miscalculation, a sliver of liver left behind, or a tiny rupture of an organ can turn a meal into a medical emergency. Yet people still choose to eat it, drawn by tradition, thrill, novelty, and the strange allure of flirting with death through cuisine. The human fascination with this toxic fish mirrors the ocean's own uneasy respect. In the reef ecosystem, the pufferfish's slow movement is not a weakness, but an invitation to understand how toxicity changes behavior. While other fish rely on speed or camouflage to evade threats, the pufferfish relies on confidence. It approaches potential predators in the same unhurried way it approaches everything else, as if aware that danger passes right through it. This calmness gives it time to inspect crevices for prey, to forage on algae without competition, to swim in open water without fear. Even its inflation mechanism, a last-ditch defense, reflects a strategy built around deterrence rather than escape. By swelling into a rounded, spiny sphere, it becomes difficult to swallow even for predators immune to tetrodotoxin. The inflation buys time, creates confusion, and deters attacks without the need to flee. But the toxin remains the ultimate barrier. In regions where predators have learned to recognize pufferfish coloration, the reef space around them becomes a delicate dance of caution. Juvenile predators watching their elders react with alarm imprint the lesson early. This creates generational knowledge that spreads from species to species, shaping reef behavior in subtle ways. Where pufferfish are abundant, the ecosystem takes on an undercurrent of avoidance, as though the fish carry a radius of silent danger that echoes beyond their actual physical presence. What makes tetrodotoxin particularly extraordinary is its evolutionary efficiency. Blocking sodium channels is a universal way to disable nearly all animals with nervous systems. This means the toxin works equally well on fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. Few venomous animals possess a defense so universally effective. Most toxins target specific physiological pathways or rely on symptoms that manifest differently among species. Tetrodotoxin does not discriminate. It paralyzes whatever nerve it touches. Even within the pufferfish's own body, immunity is not absolute. The fish carries binding proteins that sequester the toxin before it can affect the fish's own sodium channels. These binding proteins act like molecular shields, locking tetrodotoxin into harmless complexes that neutralize its effects. Without these proteins, the fish would succumb to its own defense. This delicate balance highlights how closely evolution has shaped the pufferfish's survival around chemical danger. As a result, the pufferfish becomes an emblem of paradox. It is small yet untouchable, slow yet protected, awkward yet afforded wide respect. It is a creature whose defense is so absolute that it controls its surroundings simply by existing within them. Predators avoid it not because of large spines or aggressive displays, but because of the sensory memory of numbness that once crept upward through their jaws or tongues. In this way, the toxin becomes a ghostly echo that follows the fish, influencing the behavior of other creatures long after the first contact. In the quiet stretches of the reef, where sand drifts in gentle patterns and the light dims into muted gold, the pufferfish moves with unhurried certainty. It is not an apex predator, nor is it a fragile prey animal. It is something in between, a slow-moving warning, a reminder of how lethal simplicity can be when chemistry and ecology align perfectly. The numbness it causes is not just a physiological effect. It is a message etched into the memory of every creature that encounters it. In a world defined by speed, camouflage, and predation, the pufferfish survives through a force that needs no aggression, no display, no chase. It survives through the quiet, creeping power of a toxin that makes even the mightiest predators hesitate. In the shallow zones of rocky coastlines, where waves break with rhythmic violence, the underwater world is shaped as much by impact as by stillness. Here, the sea is never quiet. Water surges forward in long, thundering pulses, then retreats with a deep, dragging sigh. Sand is lifted and dropped. Algae bends in swaying arcs, and light fractures across the surface like a shattered mirror. Amid this constant turbulence, there is a surprising kind of permanence. Dark, spherical shapes, fixed to stone like ancient ornaments, placed there by time itself. These are sea urchins, the sharp and silent guardians of the substrate, whose presence has shaped the architecture of coastal ecosystems for millions of years. Seen from above, a field of sea urchins resembles a scatter of black moons across the rocks, each one covered in a dense forest of spines that shift with the movement of water. Some species are nearly invisible, blending into the surface with muted purple or charcoal hues. Others glow in faint reds, greens, or deep ambers, their spines catching the sun in subtle reflections. They sit motionless at first glance, but beneath this stillness is an organism engaged in constant, deliberate activity. The spines click and scrape, anchoring the urchin against waves strong enough to rip kelp from its holdfasts. The tube feet, soft, flexible appendages that emerge between the spines, grip the stone with gentle precision, allowing the animal to climb, rotate, and reposition itself with surprising grace for a creature armored like a medieval mace. But one of the most defining features of many sea urchin species lies not in their movement, but in their defenses. The spines themselves are more than simple physical deterrents. In venomous species, they become hypodermic weapons, capable of delivering burning pain and lingering inflammation to anything that presses against them. Even more insidious are the tiny pedicellariae, minute, claw-like structures positioned between the spines that resemble microscopic pincers. In some urchins, these pedicellariae contain venom potent enough to cause intense stinging, throbbing pain, or tissue irritation that can last days. They can latch onto skin, break off into wounds, and continue delivering venom long after the intruder has retreated. These combined defenses create a zone of deterrence around each animal, a buffer of spines and chemical weaponry that discourages nearly all potential predators from taking the risk. In the dynamic setting of wave-battered rocks, this protection is essential. Sea urchins are relatively slow grazers, feeding on algae that coats the surfaces of stones, boulders, and coral. Without their defenses, they would be easy targets for fish, sea stars, crabs, and even shorebirds. The ocean is filled with hungry eyes and opportunistic hunters, and a soft-bodied creature like an urchin would be quickly stripped from the substrate without a shield. The venom ensures that any predator attempting to bite or crush them receives a swift and memorable lesson. The pain can be sharp, electric, and immediate, followed by hours of throbbing discomfort as the venom spreads through the tissue. Larger predators with stronger jaws may survive the encounter without serious harm, but the memory of the sting remains. Most do not attempt a second bite. This deterrent behavior has far-reaching ecological consequences. Sea urchins are, in many ways, the custodians of rocky surfaces. Their grazing prevents certain types of fast-growing algae from smothering the substrate, allowing slower species to establish footholds. Their presence also discourages other grazers from stripping the rocks too aggressively. Many fish that feed on algae are cautious around dense urchin populations, learning early that grazing too close to these spine spheres can result in a mouthful of needle or a dose of venom. This creates a mosaic of grazing pressure, some areas scraped clean by herbivorous fish, others left as untouched patches where algae grows thick and lush under the protection of the urchins. These protected zones serve as nurseries for countless small animals. Tiny crustaceans hide among the algae, using it as both shelter and feeding ground. Juvenile fish weave through the blades, safe from larger predators that avoid the hazardous perimeter of the urchin fields. Even worms, mollusks, and brittle stars find refuge in the crevices shaped by the urchin's movement and feeding patterns. In this way, the venomous defenses of sea urchins indirectly support biodiversity, creating microhabitats that would otherwise be grazed to bare stone. The spines themselves are remarkable structures. Some are long and needle-like, capable of piercing skin with a single touch. Others are shorter and thicker, forming a kind of armored hedge around the animal. The material of the spines, dense calcium carbonate arranged in a microscopic lattice, gives them both strength and a surprising degree of flexibility. When pressure is applied, the spines bend slightly before breaking, often snapping off inside the wound. This is not accidental. It ensures that the predator or careless intruder continues to feel the effects long after contact, as the embedded spine fragments cause inflammation and tissue irritation. Watching a predator attempt to tackle an urchin is to witness the futility of brute force against biological engineering. A fish like a triggerfish, one of the few species capable of preying on urchins, must use specialized techniques. It approaches cautiously, flipping the urchin with precise mouth movements to expose the softer underside where spines are less dense. Even then, the predator must avoid the pedicellariae, those tiny venomous claws that snap shut instantaneously when touched. Many predators simply do not bother. The risk outweighs the reward. For humans, encounters with venomous urchins are unexpected lessons in caution. Stepping on an urchin hidden beneath a thin layer of sand or algae delivers a stabbing pain, followed by waves of burning discomfort. The spines break easily, lodging deep into the skin where they dissolve slowly, causing continued irritation for days. In species with venomous pedicellariae, even lightly brushing the surface with a hand can leave clusters of microscopic claw tips embedded in the skin, releasing venom in tiny pulses that prolong the agony. The sting is rarely life-threatening, but it is profoundly humbling. A reminder that even the smallest creatures can command respect through chemical strategy rather than brute strength. Yet this physical and chemical deterrence is only one side of the sea urchin's ecological influence. Their grazing plays a critical role in preventing the transformation of rocky reefs into algal monocultures. When urchin populations decline due to disease, predation, or human harvesting, algae can rapidly overtake the substrate. This shifts the balance of the ecosystem, reducing coral recruitment, decreasing habitat diversity, and altering the species composition of the area. In many regions, sea urchins serve as keystone grazers, maintaining the delicate equilibrium between algal growth and open rock surfaces needed for a wide variety of marine life to thrive. Their spines also shape the behavior of other species. Herbivorous fish may graze up to the edge of a field of urchins, but rarely enter it. This behavior creates grazing halos, clear patches around coral heads or rocks surrounded by zones of dense urchin occupancy. These spatial patterns tell the story of territory defined not by aggression, but by risk. Every creature in the ecosystem reads the same message: enter this area at your own peril. Even the presence of venom alters water flow patterns. The spines disrupt currents, creating small eddies that trap plankton and algae fragments. These captured particles feed micro-invertebrates that cluster around the urchins, adding another layer of complexity to the habitat they maintain. Sea urchins become living structures, creatures that not only survive in their environment, but actively shape it through both physical form and chemical deterrence. What makes this system particularly fascinating is that the venom is not used to hunt, nor is it a tool of dominance. It is a defensive mechanism refined by evolutionary pressures that reward survival, not confrontation. The venom ensures that sea urchins remain in the places where their ecological role is most needed, protecting the substrate from overgrazing and creating safe havens for small organisms. Their spines and pedicellariae make them nearly untouchable, giving them the stability required to influence the ecosystem at a foundational level. As the tide shifts and the sun drops lower, the underwater landscape takes on a different complexion. Shadows grow longer, the water cools slightly, and the urchins begin to move in earnest. Their slow march across the rocks is almost imperceptible until viewed over hours, a gentle, continuous scraping that cleans the stone of algal film. Each movement reshapes the microenvironment, clearing some areas while allowing others to flourish behind a wall of venomous spines. The cycle repeats daily, quietly sustaining the balance of an ecosystem constantly on the edge of change. In the end, the sea urchin's story is one of subtle power. It does not chase, strike, or pursue. It does not intimidate with speed or strength. It influences the world through deterrence, through the unspoken rule that pain awaits those who ignore the warning of its spines. It is a creature that embodies a deeper truth of marine ecosystems. Survival often comes not from aggression, but from shaping the environment in ways that allow an organism to persist, and through persistence, to define the lives of everything around it. Where the rocks remain alive with crevices, algae gardens, and the bustling homes of small animals, the sea urchin stands silent at the center. Its needles raised, its chemistry primed, its presence essential. The edge of the sea is a deceptive place, where the water thins into soft, shifting sand, and sunlight cuts down in clean ribbons. The ocean appears harmless. Waves fold themselves into gentle sheets over ankles and bury footprints almost instantly. This is where children play, where wading birds stalk small fish, where the shallows seem like a safe boundary between two worlds. But just beneath that thin veneer of calm, the sand hides living shapes that remain perfectly still until movement or pressure forces them to react. In the pale, rippled substrate of beaches and sandbanks lies one of the ocean's most misunderstood and accidental defenders, the stingray. Buried beneath the sand with only the faint outline of its disc visible, a stingray becomes a textured shadow. Flecks of sediment dust its back, settling into the mottled patterns that make each individual nearly indistinguishable from the seabed. Its eyes, set atop the head, protrude just enough to scan the water above, while its spiracles, small breathing ports positioned behind the eyes, draw in seawater for respiration without forcing the ray to lift itself from cover. This ability to remain motionless, hidden in plain sight, is the stingray's first defense, and it is so effective that even seasoned divers occasionally drift inches above a buried ray without recognizing the shape at their feet. In these quiet, sandy shallows, stingrays behave more like content grazers than predators. Many species feed on small invertebrates, worms hidden in the sediment, clams buried deep beneath the surface, tiny crustaceans that scurry through the sand. The rays glide low to the bottom, flapping their pectoral fins in slow, rhythmic waves that stir up clouds of debris. When they detect prey through their electroreceptors, tiny organs near the mouth that sense the faint electrical signals given off by living tissue, they settle flat on the sand and use powerful suction to pull their meal into their mouths. There is no rush, no chase, no need for speed. In the world of the stingray, patience and precision are the dominant hunting strategies. Yet despite their peaceful routines, stingrays are equipped with one of the most feared defensive weapons in shallow water, the venomous tail spine. This spine, often incorrectly called a stinger, is a complex structure built for a very specific moment of vulnerability. It lies along the upper side of the tail, encased in a thin sheath of tissue. The spine's surface is serrated in a pattern of backward-facing barbs, making it extraordinarily difficult to remove once embedded. Beneath the sheath lies venom-producing tissue that releases compounds capable of causing intense burning pain, severe swelling, and involuntary muscle contractions. It is not a weapon meant for hunting. It is a weapon of last resort. To understand the stingray's barb, it must be evaluated not from the fear it inspires in humans, but from the perspective of a gentle animal whose lifestyle attracts danger. Stingrays feed close to the ground. They bury themselves. They move slowly and often rest in places where sharks, large predatory fish, and even wading predators might step or strike by accident. Their bodies are soft and vulnerable, lacking the rigid spines or thick scales that many other bottom dwellers use for defense. Evolution provided the stingray with a single primary option: make the cost of attacking them too high for any predator to risk. The tail spine is the embodiment of this strategy. When threatened, usually by a large predator approaching from above or behind, the stingray reacts with astonishing speed. It arches its body and flicks its tail upward in a whip-like motion. The spine slashes upward with force strong enough to penetrate thick skin, muscle, and sometimes even bone. The motion is defensive, triggered not by aggression, but by fear or pressure. Sharks are the most common targets, often biting rays from behind or attempting to pin them against the bottom. The spine, aimed instinctively toward the attacker's head, can pierce a shark's snout, cheeks, or even its eyes. This creates enough pain and surprise to make even large predators withdraw. The venom itself is biologically fascinating. It is stored in glandular tissue that lines the grooves of the spine. When the spine punctures flesh and the sheath tears, the venom is released into the wound. The chemical composition varies between species, but commonly includes neurotoxins, enzymes that break down muscle tissue, and compounds that cause immediate and often overwhelming pain. In humans, this manifests as a searing, radiating sensation that can become unbearable within minutes. Swelling occurs quickly, and muscle spasms may ripple through the affected limb. In rare cases, if the spine strikes vital organs or arteries, the injury can be fatal, not because of the venom, but because of the mechanical damage inflicted by the serrated spine. In its evolutionary context, however, the purpose of the venom is not to kill. It is to communicate one message: do not continue. For most predators, the pain alone is enough to end the encounter permanently. Like the pufferfish's toxicity or the lionfish's defensive spines, the stingray's barb is a deterrent designed to alter predator behavior across generations. A shark that receives a stingray spine in its snout remembers the encounter. Its offspring, through learned behavior or observation, approach rays with caution. Rays, despite their vulnerability, remain present in shallow ecosystems precisely because their defenses follow a simple principle: injure the attacker enough to ensure survival, but not through prolonged conflict. In the sandy shallows, this evolutionary equilibrium shapes the behavior of many animals. Predators approach stingrays indirectly, circling rather than diving. Wading birds tiptoe around dark patches in the sand, instinctively avoiding areas that might conceal a ray. Even humans, once stung, learn to shuffle their feet along the bottom to warn buried rays of their presence. The barb enforces caution as much through reputation as through actual use. The ecology of the shallows depends on this balance. Stingrays play a subtle but essential role in sculpting the seafloor. As they feed, they leave behind crater-like pits where their suction excavations disturb the sediment. These pits become temporary shelters for small fish or resting places for crustaceans. The rays stir nutrients trapped in the sand, creating localized plumes that feed plankton and support filter feeders. Entire microhabitats form in the wake of a single stingray's journey across the seabed. Without stingrays, the shallow ecosystems would change dramatically. Their feeding clears algae that might otherwise choke the sand, preventing the overgrowth of species that rely on buried prey. Their movements aerate the sediment, releasing trapped oxygen back into the ecosystem. And their role as prey, albeit heavily defended prey, supports populations of large sharks and other predators skilled enough to approach without injury. But it is the barb, above all, that ensures stingrays can continue fulfilling these ecological roles. Unlike sea urchins, which defend the substrate with stationary spines, stingrays defend themselves while moving. Unlike stonefish, whose venom protects them from being stepped on accidentally, stingrays carry their defense behind them like a warning held in reserve. And unlike lionfish or pufferfish, whose defenses create halo zones of avoidance, stingrays blend warning and invisibility into a single survival tactic. They do not advertise their danger. They simply react with explosive force only when forced to. For humans, encounters with stingrays are usually accidental. Stepping on a buried ray can trigger the defensive strike immediately. The pain is immediate and intense, often described as if the limb is being crushed from the inside. The serrated spine tears tissue as it enters, and the broken pieces may remain embedded long after the strike. The venom exacerbates the injury, creating swelling and spasms that can incapacitate the victim. Yet despite these effects, stingray injuries are rarely fatal when treated properly. They are serious warnings delivered by an animal that would prefer to avoid conflict entirely. It is this reluctant nature that makes stingrays so compelling. They are peaceful creatures forced into carrying a deadly weapon. They glide with gentle ease across the seafloor, stirring sand into soft clouds as they search for buried prey. They rest quietly beneath the surface, leaving only a slight rise in the substrate to mark their presence. And only when something heavy presses down on them or a predator lunges too quickly does the barb snap upward, a moment of violence in an otherwise tranquil life. In the shallows where sunlight flickers on sandbars and the tide whispers against the coast, stingrays remain as reminders that even the quietest creatures carry stories written in survival. Their barbs protect not just themselves, but the ecosystems that depend on their foraging and movement. They shape the patterns of both predator and prey, turning the simple act of walking across the bottom into an exercise in mindfulness. And in doing so, they demonstrate a deeper truth, that the ocean's defenses are often hidden beneath the sand, waiting in silence, held in check until the moment they are needed. Beneath the quiet surface of the beach, the stingray rests, its tail curled loosely behind it, its barb sheathed and ready, not as a weapon of aggression, but as a shield forged by millions of years of pressure, predation, and the need to survive in the dangerous beauty of the shallows. The reef at midday turns into a blaze of refracted sunlight, a shifting mosaic of color where every surface seems alive. Small fish drift through gardens of branching coral. Shrimp hop across sponges like tiny drummers tapping their instruments, and sand shifts in pale clouds with every gentle surge of current. Beneath this bright, tranquil landscape, however, lies a darker architecture of tunnels and cavities carved into the limestone. These burrows are shadows within shadows, their entrances forming perfect circles or jagged crevices where the light fades into secrecy. Most creatures approach these openings with caution, for the occupant inside is not a passive tenant. It is one of the most aggressive and heavily armed predators on the reef, the mantis shrimp. A mantis shrimp's presence is never announced by movement or display. The animal lurks within the tunnel's darkness, only its eyes protruding slightly above the entrance. Those eyes, perched on independent stalks, sweep the environment in slow, deliberate arcs, able to detect ultraviolet, polarized light, and a spectrum of colors far beyond human ability. They read motion in fractions of a heartbeat and track the faint twitch of a hermit crab, the shuffle of a snail, the hesitant approach of a curious fish. To the mantis shrimp, the world is a landscape of opportunities and threats, rendered in incredibly precise detail. It is here, at the threshold of its burrow, where the mantis shrimp becomes a study in contrast. Unlike the venomous species that populate the reef, stonefish, sea snakes, lionfish, this creature carries no toxins. It does not rely on chemical warfare or defensive barriers. Its strategy is far more primal. It uses physics itself as a weapon, converting muscle contraction into raw force at a scale that seems almost impossible for an animal of its size. The mantis shrimp's striking appendages, modified legs called raptorial clubs, are among the most powerful biological structures on Earth. When the mantis shrimp attacks, it does not merely hit, it detonates. The club accelerates with such astonishing speed that scientists compare the motion to a bullet fired from a handgun. In the space of a few thousandths of a second, the appendage reaches velocities high enough to generate a shockwave in the surrounding water. This shockwave alone is capable of stunning prey, rupturing tissue, or cracking shells, even if the club does not make direct contact. And with each strike, a momentary cavitation bubble forms, a vacuum pocket generated by the sheer velocity of the blow. When this bubble collapses, it releases a secondary burst of energy, a micro-explosion of force and heat that adds to the destructive power of the strike. For prey unfortunate enough to be within range, the outcome is sudden and unavoidable. Crab claws burst apart as though struck by a hammer. Snail shells fracture along invisible stress lines. Even aquarium glass can shatter under repeated blows. A mantis shrimp is, quite literally, capable of punching its enclosure open if it is displeased with its environment. The animal's ability to produce such force comes from a remarkable combination of biology and biomechanics. Within the club lies a structure of mineralized material arranged in layers, each angled to absorb and dissipate energy without shattering. This gives the club the resilience necessary to withstand repeated impacts that would break almost any other biological material. The mantis shrimp also employs a spring-loading mechanism built into its appendage. Muscles contract slowly, storing potential energy in an anatomical latch. When the latch releases, that stored energy converts into kinetic energy in an explosive burst, propelling the club forward at speeds human eyes cannot track. The mantis shrimp does not need venom because it can simply obliterate whatever stands in its way. This physical dominance shapes everything about its ecology. The mantis shrimp's burrow is not just a home, it is a fortress defended with overwhelming force. Any creature that ventures too close, out of curiosity, hunger, or accidental wandering, risks being struck with a blow strong enough to crush bone or carapace. Small fish learn quickly to avoid the circular entrances dotting the sand. Crabs scuttle around them in wide arcs. Even animals larger than the mantis shrimp, such as octopuses, approach with caution. While an octopus is capable of preying on a mantis shrimp, the risk of injury is high. One misplaced tentacle, one strike to the head, and the hunter becomes the casualty. For humans, the danger is equally real. An incautious diver who attempts to handle a mantis shrimp can receive a strike powerful enough to break skin, fracture a finger, or cause deep lacerations. The pain is immediate, sharp, and accompanied by swelling as tissues absorb the force of the blow. There is no venom to spread, no chemical burn, no neurotoxin. The damage is purely mechanical, inflicted by the acceleration of a club that functions like a biological bullet. It is an injury earned through proximity alone, a reminder that some animals have evolved to weaponize motion itself rather than rely on poison. What makes this system so extraordinary is that the mantis shrimp is not a reckless aggressor. It does not strike without reason. It uses its power with precision. When hunting, it positions itself carefully, waiting for the exact moment when prey exposes a vulnerable angle. A crab lifting its claw, a snail retracting slightly from its shell opening, a mollusk adjusting its grip on a rock. These tiny movements signal opportunity. The strike that follows is lightning fast and perfectly targeted, often breaking the prey's exoskeleton or shell in a single hit. The mantis shrimp then drags the disabled animal into its burrow, where it can feed in safety. This predatory lifestyle plays a critical role in the balance of reef ecosystems. By preying on hard-shelled invertebrates, mantis shrimps help regulate populations of crabs, snails, and other grazers, that might otherwise overwhelm algae or damage coral. Their territorial nature also shapes the distribution of small reef animals. Few creatures choose to establish burrows near an active mantis shrimp, knowing that the cost of trespassing can be fatal. The result is a patchwork of zones dominated by different species, each influenced by the presence of a predator capable of delivering catastrophic damage in an instant. Inside their burrows, mantis shrimps maintain surprisingly meticulous homes. They rearrange pebbles, shells, and coral fragments, creating walls and chambers that reflect their personal architectural choices. Some build long tunnels extending deep into the substrate, while others create multi-entrance fortresses. These structures provide shelter from predators and allow mantis shrimps to ambush prey from positions of maximum advantage. The burrow becomes an extension of the animal's body, a place where it can strike without exposing vulnerable parts of its anatomy. The lack of venom in the mantis shrimp's arsenal highlights an important evolutionary truth. Defenses and offenses do not need to rely on chemistry to be effective. In a world filled with stings, spines, toxins, and chemical deterrents, the mantis shrimp has mastered a different path. It survives and thrives through the refined use of kinetic force, converting its muscles and exoskeleton into tools of raw, undeniable power. The agony it inflicts is not molecular, but mechanical. A crushing blow that communicates the same message as venom: keep your distance. In this sense, mantis shrimps occupy a unique position among reef predators. They do not need to advertise their danger through bright coloration, although many species display vibrant patterns and iridescent hues. Their reputation is spread through direct experience: predators attempting to investigate a burrow entrance, fish approaching too closely, crabs venturing within striking range. These encounters often end before the aggressor can fully comprehend the threat. A flash of movement, a sudden impact, and the lesson is delivered with brutal clarity. Even the phenomenon of cavitation bubbles plays a role in the animal's ecological influence. The micro-explosions generated by the collapsing bubbles create noise and vibrations detectable by nearby creatures, further reinforcing the association between the mantis shrimp and danger. These vibrations ripple through the sand and rock, acting like invisible warnings to anything capable of sensing them. In the broader tapestry of the reef, the mantis shrimp represents a force of selective pressure that shapes both behavior and evolution. Prey species develop thicker shells, tougher claws, or more cautious movement patterns in response. Predators adapt by approaching mantis shrimp burrows from angles less likely to trigger defensive strikes. Over time, the reef becomes an ecosystem defined not only by chemical warfare, but by the presence of an animal whose weapon is a marvel of engineering. There is irony in the mantis shrimp's reliance on brute force. It is, in many ways, one of the most visually sophisticated creatures in the ocean, possessing color perception beyond anything humans can imagine. Yet its primary interaction with the world is through impact, through shattering, breaking, and stunning. It sees more colors than nearly any creature on Earth, yet it communicates its dominance through violence delivered in milliseconds. In the quiet moments when the water stills and the reef settles into its daily rhythm, the burrow entrances remain silent and unassuming. But beneath each one lies the coiled potential of explosive motion. The mantis shrimp waits, patient and precise, prepared to unleash the full power of its biological arsenal the moment the boundary of its home is crossed. No venom, no chemicals, no warning, just physics, pure, overwhelming, and absolute. The open ocean at dusk transforms into a world of silhouettes. Light fades into a dim blue haze, softening the outlines of drifting fish and blurring the boundaries between water and shadow. This is a dangerous hour when the brightness of day no longer offers protection and the full darkness of night has not yet arrived. In these in-between moments, the tiger shark begins to stir. Its striped body, faintly barred like the shadows of palm leaves on sand, moves with fluid certainty through water that hides almost everything. Among sharks, the tiger is not the fastest, nor the largest, nor the most curious, but it is the most willing. It moves through ecosystems like a roaming collector, sampling whatever the ocean presents. Turtles, fish, birds, carrion, and sometimes objects with no nutritional value at all. Its strategy is simple. Investigate everything, bite what seems edible, and let evolution handle the details. The tiger shark's greatest weapon is not venom, speed, or stealth. Instead, it lies within its mouth. Rows of serrated teeth shaped like curved meat saws, each one capable of slicing through flesh, hide, and bone with horrifying ease. These teeth are not long. They do not need to be. Their power comes from their shape. Each tooth is broad and flat with deeply cut notches along the edge, forming a pattern of miniature hooks that grip and then tear. When the shark bites, it does not strike like a snake delivering poison or a mantis shrimp delivering blunt trauma. It bites with a dragging, sawing motion that rips apart tissue in pieces rather than clean cuts. Nothing about the teeth is subtle. They are built for destruction, and destruction here is not a metaphor, but a biological reality. As the tiger shark approaches potential prey, it often circles first, tasting chemical cues with its sensory paws. The animal might nudge with its snout or brush lightly past a fish or turtle. The sample everything strategy is not clumsiness. It is a calculated exploration. A quick taste gives information about the prey's health, density of muscle, or likelihood of being a profitable meal. Many species interpret this nudge as warning enough and flee. But when a tiger shark commits to a strike, the effect is immediate and catastrophic. The jaws accelerate forward with tremendous force, powered by muscles that anchor deep into the skull. When the serrated teeth clamp down, they do not simply puncture, they anchor, grip, and pull. The shark shakes its head, wrenching sideways and downward. The effect on tissue is similar to tearing fabric with a serrated knife. Fibers rupture in all directions, leaving ragged edges that bleed profusely. Bone cracks under the force. Shells of sea turtles fracture. Even armored fish offer little resistance. Unlike great whites, which often bite, release, and wait for prey to weaken from blood loss, tiger sharks tend to continue biting until the prey is subdued or significant portions of flesh are removed. What makes the tiger shark's bite uniquely dangerous is not just the tooth structure or jaw power. It is the invisible biological aftermath. The shark's mouth is a thriving ecosystem of bacteria, many of which originate not from the shark itself, but from the animals it scavenges. Tiger sharks consume carcasses at all stages of decomposition. They feed on dying fish, rotting turtles, and drifting dead matter that other predators ignore. This constant exposure populates their mouths with dense, diverse bacterial communities. Some bacteria produce toxins, others accelerate tissue decay. Many are harmless to the shark, but devastating to the animals it bites. When a tiger shark wounds prey, but does not kill it outright, the story does not end with escape. The torn flesh becomes a gateway for bacteria, and the injury begins to worsen almost immediately. Infections take hold deep in the wound, where torn muscle fibers and ruptured blood vessels provide ideal conditions for microbial proliferation. Large prey, such as dolphins, sea turtles, or even whales that survive the initial attack, often swim away, carrying wounds that throb with pain and become compromised over hours or days. These injuries degrade mobility, weaken immune responses, and make the prey easier targets for subsequent predators. A wounded turtle that barely escapes might be unable to dive properly. A wounded dolphin may struggle to keep pace with its pod. A wounded fish may lose the ability to burst swim. The consequences ripple outward, converting a single bite into an extended death sentence. This phenomenon reveals one of the most subtle but powerful aspects of tiger shark evolution. They do not need venom because their weaponry already ensures progressive damage. The saw-like teeth tear rather than sever. The bacterial soup in their mouths infects rather than heals. The combination is a form of biological brutality that continues long after the shark swims away. It is an evolutionary partnership between physical trauma and microbial decay. The shark does not cultivate these bacteria deliberately. The ecosystem inside its mouth is a byproduct of its scavenging lifestyle. Yet evolution favors sharks whose microbiomes amplify lethality. The bacteria benefit by spreading into new hosts. The shark benefits by weakening prey beyond the initial bite. In this sense, The tiger shark's bite functions not as a single moment of violence, but as a prolonged ecological event. Large marine animals know this instinctively. Dolphins often mob tiger sharks, using their agility to drive the predator away. Sea turtles change course the moment they sense a striped silhouette in the water. Even large fish alter migration patterns during seasons when tiger sharks patrol the shallows. The fear is justified. These sharks can strike from below or from the side, and their ability to twist mid-motion makes them unpredictable. Unlike the ambush of a crocodile or the lunge of a barracuda, a tiger shark's attack is more flexible, more exploratory, adapted for a wider variety of prey types and environmental conditions. The tiger shark's sample-everything behavior also has ecological implications far beyond predation. By consuming carcasses of large marine animals, they serve as cleaners of the ocean, preventing disease outbreaks caused by decaying matter. Their feeding patterns redistribute nutrients. Their movement between coastal shallows and deep offshore waters transfers energy up and down the food chain. And by weakening injured animals, they create opportunities for smaller predators and scavengers, contributing to an entire cascade of ecological interactions. Yet, despite their power, tiger sharks are not reckless hunters. They approach cautiously, test the environment, and choose targets based on opportunity rather than aggression. Their senses, electroreception, smell, and low-light vision, allow them to evaluate prey before committing. They strike when the odds favor success, not when they are simply excited by movement. They are opportunists, not berserkers. Many bites occur not in full-speed charges, but in calculated, controlled advances, followed by sudden, decisive action. When viewed in the context of other predatory strategies, the tiger shark's approach stands alone. No venom is needed like the box jellyfish. No constriction is needed like the sea snake's quick paralysis. No stinging spine, no biochemical burn, no toxin-ridden defense. Just teeth shaped by millions of years into serrated tools of destruction, and a mouth cultured in a microbial lineage that continues the attack long after the shark has left. In the twilight waters where the last light filters through the waves, the tiger shark moves with the assurance of an animal that does not need to hide or rush. It owns the dusk. It owns the night. And it owns its identity as the reef's most versatile predator. Every bite is both an immediate injury and a delayed assault. Every wound it creates becomes part of the ocean's cycle of life and death. Every attack is a reminder that nature's most effective weapons are not always chemical. They are sometimes mechanical and biological in ways that continue rippling long after the first strike. The tiger shark does not need venom because its teeth and its microbiome are enough to shape the lives, movements, and survival of every animal that encounters it. In a world where danger often hides behind bright colors or silent toxins, the tiger shark's power is blunt, raw, and unapologetically physical. A living saw that turns the ocean's twilight into a realm governed by caution, respect, and the knowledge that one bite can echo for days. At dawn, when the first thin spears of sunlight cut into the upper layers of the sea, the open water appears empty. Fish scatter into distance, plankton sinks deeper, and even the reef seems to pause for a moment before the day begins in full. But this calm is an illusion created by speed. Speed so sudden and violent that the animals capable of generating it seem invisible until the instant they strike. Among these invisible hunters is the barracuda, a creature that embodies the ruthless efficiency of predation through motion. It is a long silver blade suspended in the water column, built for acceleration, precision, and the ability to inflict catastrophic injury in a fraction of a second. Seen from a distance, a barracuda resembles a shimmer of light more than a solid form. Its elongated body is shaped like a missile, with narrow fins arranged to reduce drag and a powerful tail designed for sudden bursts of propulsion. The scales reflect the sun with a hard metallic sheen that blends perfectly with the water's refractive glare. The head is elongated, the jawline strong, and the mouth lined with teeth that stand out like shards of broken glass. Even before the barracuda moves, it has the stillness of a predator, waiting for the single moment where speed becomes absolute advantage. In the open water where barracudas hunt, prey fish rely on agility, schooling behavior, and sudden directional changes to survive. Speed is abundant here. Nearly every fish in the mid-water column is built to sprint. Yet barracudas belong to a different league. Their strategy is neither sustained pursuit nor complex ambush choreography. Instead, they specialize in the decisive moment where acceleration intersects with anatomical design. The barracuda's body is primed for the fastest possible strike over a very short distance, and the jaws are engineered to maximize damage in that fleeting instant. The attack begins with an almost imperceptible twitch. The barracuda aligns its body perfectly with the target, muscles coiling along its spine. Then, with a sudden surge powered by explosive contractions of its tail, the predator launches forward. The movement is so rapid that it creates a shock wave in the water, a pressure disturbance that radiates outward even before its teeth make contact. Prey fish sense this disturbance milliseconds before the strike, but rarely have time to respond. The barracuda reaches top speed in the blink of an eye, closing the distance with a precision that feels mechanical in its efficiency. When the jaws snap shut, the moment is both surgical and brutal. Barracuda teeth are not serrated like those of tiger sharks, nor are they crushing like the jaws of groupers. Instead, they are razor-sharp, needle-pointed, and widely spaced. This arrangement allows the teeth to puncture deeply and slice through scale, flesh, and muscle with almost no resistance. Unlike predators that grip or tear in prolonged attacks, the barracuda's goal is to inflict immediate structural failure. It aims for the midsection of its prey, where the body's center of mass stabilizes movement and holds the main swimming muscles that generate escape power. Striking here is no accident. The barracuda's brain and sensory system have evolved to calculate movement patterns with extraordinary precision. By hitting the mid-body, the predator disrupts the fish's ability to swim in a single bite. The prey's muscles, now severed or torn, lose coordination instantly. A fast-moving fish that could have darted away becomes a flailing fragment within seconds. The pain is immediate and overwhelming, but in the biological narrative, pain is secondary to mechanical failure. The fish is disabled not because it is suffering, but because the physical structures needed for survival have been destroyed. This precision sets the barracuda apart from other high-speed predators. While many fast predators rely on overwhelming force or repeated attacks, the barracuda's success lies in its ability to convert speed into anatomical sabotage. By slicing through the thick bands of muscle along the lateral line, it shuts down the prey's propulsion. By cutting through spinal structures or severing nerve clusters, it short-circuits the ability to coordinate movement. The prey may still be alive, still conscious, but its body no longer obeys the commands required to survive. Escape becomes impossible. Drifting, helpless movement takes over. Once the prey is disabled, the barracuda does not waste energy on extended conflict. It circles, observing the erratic motion of the victim, and waits for the exact moment when the weaker fish can no longer maintain balance. Then it closes in, often taking another precise bite that removes a large section of flesh. Some prey are eaten in multiple bites, reduced to chunks small enough to swallow whole. Others are consumed after drifting downward, still alive but powerless to flee. In this cold efficiency, the barracuda embodies a predator that has no interest in prolonged struggle. The goal is speed, precision, and the conversion of movement into food with minimal expenditure of energy. Because the barracuda's teeth are shaped for slicing, not gripping, the wounds they leave behind are remarkably clean. Scales split neatly, muscle fibers part in smooth lines, and pieces of flesh separate with an almost surgical appearance. This contrasts sharply with the jagged tearing seen in shark bites or the crushing damage inflicted by predators that rely on blunt force. To the untrained eye, the wound of a barracuda can resemble a clean cut made by a sharp blade. But beneath that clean surface is catastrophic internal damage, severed muscle bands, exposed organs, and spinal injuries that make coordinated motion impossible. For prey that somehow escape the initial attack, survival becomes a near impossibility. The implications for animals that survive a barracuda bite extend far beyond the immediate injury. Large fish that escape often swim with asymmetrical patterns, their muscles no longer working in harmony. Some develop infections as seawater enters exposed tissue. Others become targets for secondary predators, sharks, groupers, or even opportunistic reef fish that nibble at open wounds. In this chain reaction, the barracuda's attack becomes the first event in a biological series that ends in the prey's eventual death, even if the barracuda never returns to finish the meal. Just like the tiger shark's bacterial-infused wounds, the barracuda's mechanical precision ensures that prey rarely recover fully. At the ecosystem level, the barracuda plays an important role in shaping the behavior of schooling fish. Large groups of baitfish often maintain open water corridors that avoid areas frequented by barracudas. They move with tighter formations, accelerate more quickly at the first sign of danger, and change direction in coordinated bursts. This heightened sensitivity contributes to the dynamic flow of energy through the food web. Barracudas thin the ranks of fast-swimming species, prevent overcrowding, and remove individuals with slower reaction times or weaker muscle performance. This is not selective predation in a conscious sense, but a natural byproduct of a predator whose strikes reward speed and punish hesitation. Even among predators, the barracuda inspires caution. Dolphins, despite their intelligence, avoid chasing fish into areas known for barracuda patrols. Sharks sometimes alter their movement patterns around schools of prey when barracudas are present, preferring not to risk surprise encounters. The possibility of a barracuda strike, even for larger animals, is enough to modify behavior. A bite from a barracuda can disable a fin, tear a muscle, or damage a jaw in a way that compromises hunting ability. Few predators can afford such injuries. Yet despite this lethal potential, the barracuda is not a reckless attacker. It conserves energy with surprising discipline. It does not rush every target or strike every movement. Instead, it chooses moments that offer a clear reward. It approaches slowly, often drifting sideways, its eyes tracking prey with predatory intelligence. Only when an opportunity aligns, the right distance, the right angle, the right burst potential, does it transform into a projectile of slicing force. This selective aggression ensures that the energy gained from a successful kill outweighs the energy spent in the attack. From an evolutionary perspective, the barracuda's success lies in its seamless fusion of physiology and strategy. Its body is built for speed, its teeth for slicing, its senses for tracking motion, and its brain for calculating optimal strike timing. It does not need venom because the architecture of its attack ensures that prey are mechanically disabled in moments. It does not rely on overwhelming force because its precision makes overwhelming force unnecessary. The ecological result is a predator that shapes the behavior, distribution, and survival of countless species simply by existing in the same waters. In the brightening light of early morning, when the sea transitions from darkness to a soft blue glow, the barracuda remains almost unseen. It hovers, motionless, a silver silhouette blending with the water's reflective surface. Then, with a burst of acceleration that leaves a ripple of disturbed water in its wake, it strikes with a violence compressed into milliseconds. The prey never sees the full shape of the attacker. It only feels the sudden, catastrophic loss of movement, the moment when speed meets precision and the ocean's quiet illusion of safety shatters. In these waters, the barracuda stands as the embodiment of physical mastery. No venom, no toxins, no biological trickery. Just pure acceleration, razor edges, and the terrifying beauty of an ambush built entirely on timing and anatomy. A hunter that turns fast, agile fish into drifting fragments with a single cut. A predator that dominates through surgical violence. A blade hidden in the blue. In the dim corridors of the reef, where daylight filters into dusky bands and the seafloor becomes a maze of crevices, cracks, and caves, the ocean feels older. Colors lose their brightness, replaced by shadows that move in slow, uncertain waves. This is the domain of the moray eel, a creature shaped by the narrow spaces it inhabits. Here, in the labyrinth of stone and coral, evolution has taken a different path. Speed loses value when there is no room to sprint. Elegance is useless when the environment compresses every movement. And here, in these tight, twisting passages, the moray eel has become a predator, defined not by venom or force, but by the mechanics of capture, by how it grips, holds, and swallows prey in a space where escape routes are measured in inches. The moray eel's body is long, muscular, and capable of bending through openings that would stop almost any other fish. Its skin lacks traditional scales, covered instead in a mucus layer that reduces friction and protects against scratches. Its head is broad and angular, with eyes positioned to peer forward into the tunnels it calls home. But the most striking feature, the one that allows this predator to dominate narrow spaces, lies in its mouth. When the moray opens its jaws, the teeth appear long, curved and needle-like, built for gripping rather than slicing. Yet behind these jaws lies another secret, an inner set of pharyngeal jaws that can move independently, shooting forward like a hidden weapon. No other fish possesses anything like this. The moray eel carries two sets of jaws, not for intimidation, but because the environment has forced an evolutionary solution to a mechanical problem: how to move prey down the throat when the predator cannot create suction. Other fish rely on suction feeding, expanding their mouths and throats to pull prey inward with water flow. But moray eels live in tight crevices where suction does not work. Their bodies cannot expand much, and the water around them has no room to move. Instead, morays evolved a system built on direct mechanical force. Their outer jaws latch onto prey, and their inner pharyngeal jaws surge forward, grab the prey from inside the mouth, and drag it backward, all while the eel maintains a firm hold in a confined space. To watch a moray strike is to witness a predator designed for ambush. The eel remains still for long stretches, its head protruding slightly from a rock cavity, mouth opening and closing rhythmically. This behavior, often mistaken for aggression, is actually a breathing mechanism. Morays draw water in through their mouths and force it out through openings behind their heads, creating the impression of a perpetual snarl. But the moment prey drifts close, an unwary fish pecking at algae, a small crustacean scuttling across the sand, the entire posture changes. The body tightens, the eyes fix, and the jaws snap forward with sudden, explosive force. The initial bite clamps down with the outer jaws, piercing the prey with curved teeth that prevent escape. These teeth do not cut, they anchor. Once the prey is secured, the inner pharyngeal jaws advance. In a motion that seems almost alien, they slide forward from the throat, extend outward behind the outer jaws and close over the prey's flesh. Then they retract, dragging the prey deeper into the throat, while the outer jaws release and bite again. The sequence repeats: bite, pull, until the prey is swallowed whole. For the prey, the sensation is catastrophic. The first bite immobilizes with puncturing force, but the second, internal bite, begins a different kind of damage. The pharyngeal jaws do not merely transport prey, they grip with teeth of their own, creating additional punctures and tearing points as they retract. Each pull forces the prey backward against the resistance of its own muscles. The sensation is like being trapped between two saws, one holding fast, the other dragging relentlessly. There is no escape, because the inner jaws continue pulling, even if the outer jaws are briefly loosened to reposition. The mechanics ensure that once prey is taken, it enters a one-way path. Struggling only embeds the teeth deeper. In the tight confines of a reef crevice, the moray system makes perfect sense. Space is limited. Suction feeding is impossible. Turning around with prey in the mouth is often risky. The double jaw mechanism creates a biological conveyor belt that moves food inward without requiring space or suction. It is a predatory adaptation so elegant and effective that it has remained unchanged for millions of years. Moray eels, however, are not only feared by prey. Divers, fishermen, and even large predators treat them with caution because the moray's bite is not easily escaped. When threatened, cornered, or provoked, a moray eel lashes out with the same efficiency it uses for ambush feeding. Its jaws clamp with surprising force for an animal of its size, and the inner jaws may engage automatically. This results in some of the most ragged wounds experienced by divers in the reef environment. Unlike the clean slices of a barracuda or the crushing bite of a grouper, moray injuries are characterized by torn, uneven edges. Flesh is ripped in multiple directions as the eel twists and pulls, attempting to drag the perceived threat deeper into its burrow. This twisting motion contributes significantly to the pain and tissue damage. The eel does not simply bite and release, it often refuses to let go. Its entire body coils, using leverage against the rock walls to wrench itself backward. The victim, whether fish, predator, or human hand, experiences the full force of this backward motion. Trying to pull free usually worsens the injury, embedding the curved teeth even deeper and causing more tearing. And because morays often anchor themselves inside crevices, their grip becomes supported by the rock itself. They are not simply biting, they are bracing, twisting, and using every mechanical advantage of their environment. In the natural world, this behavior ensures that larger predators think twice before attacking a moray eel. Sharks, barracudas, and groupers sometimes prey on morays, but the risk of injury is high. A moray wedged in a crevice can inflict deep wounds that jeopardize a predator's hunting ability. Many predatory fish have scars along their snouts or jaws that resemble crescent-shaped marks, testaments to encounters with morays defending their territory. Because the price of a moray bite can be long-lasting, many predators choose easier prey. The agony produced by a moray bite is not the result of venom. Moray eels do not rely on toxins. Instead, the pain stems from mechanical trauma, the tearing of muscle fibers, the puncturing of nerves, and the twisting motion that rips tissue beyond the initial bite. Infections are also common, as the mouths of morays harbor bacteria from the reef crevices they inhabit and the prey they consume. A wound delivered in this environment becomes inflamed quickly, and the combination of tearing and bacterial exposure makes recovery slow. Yet the predator behind this violent feeding system is surprisingly shy. Moray eels spend most of their lives hidden, emerging only to hunt or to shift positions. They are not bold roamers like sharks, nor territorial patrollers like groupers. They depend on concealment, ambush, and the security of their rock fortresses. Their double jaws are not tools of intimidation. They are tools of necessity. In the darkness of a confined tunnel, when a fish thrashes in panic, suction does not work. The moray's solution, to hold with one jaw and drag with a second, ensures that food goes one direction only, inward. The ecological impact of morays extends beyond their predatory habits. By occupying crevices, they influence the distribution of small reef fish, many of which avoid areas known to house large eels. They help control populations of octopuses, crustaceans, and fish that would otherwise overconsume small invertebrates. Their presence shapes hiding strategies, migration patterns, and the occupancy of reef shelters. Moray eels contribute to the balance of the ecosystem, not through dominance, but through their specialized niche, their mastery of tight spaces, and their ability to capture prey that other predators cannot reach. In the dark cracks of the reef, where visibility fades and only faint glimmers of surface light penetrate, the moray eel moves as an extension of the environment. Its jaws open slowly and rhythmically as it breathes, giving a glimpse of the weaponry waiting inside. When prey approaches, the stillness vanishes, replaced by speed, force, and the remarkable choreography of twin jaws working in sequence. The outer jaws grip. The inner jaws shoot forward. The prey is dragged deeper, pulled back inch by inch as the moray retreats into its refuge. There is no venom here, no chemical burn, no bacterial saw blade. The agony is a side effect of mechanical certainty. The moray eel is an engineer of confinement, a predator perfected for a world where every meal must be secured and swallowed in a space smaller than the length of its body. Its double jaws ensure that once prey enters the reach of its bite, there is no turning back. In the reef's narrowest corridors, the moray eel reigns not through speed or spectacle, but through a death grip that evolution has refined into one of the ocean's most remarkable and relentless feeding systems. In the quietest corners of the reef, where rocks stack like broken monuments and sand gathers in windless drifts, the ocean seems briefly still. But within this stillness lies one of the most adaptable and deceptive predators in the marine world. It presses its soft body into cracks so narrow that even small fish cannot follow. It moves like smoke underwater, reshaping itself fluidly into whatever form the terrain allows. It is the octopus, a creature that rewrites the rules of anatomy, movement, and predation, and does so armed with a weapon few expect: venom. The octopus is often imagined as clever, elusive, and curious. These qualities are real, but they sit atop a biological strategy far older and far more ruthless. Every octopus must solve a simple problem. How does a soft, boneless animal dominate a world filled with armored prey? Crabs, snails, and clams, staples of an octopus diet, defend themselves with shells, spines, and hardened plates. Most predators rely on crushing jaws or battering strikes to break these defenses, but the octopus has neither. Instead, it approaches the challenge with a blend of mechanical finesse and chemical warfare. When the octopus hunts, the scene unfolds with slow, deliberate confidence. It extends an arm, then another, exploring the contours of a rock ledge. Suckers press against the surface, tasting and gripping simultaneously, collecting information invisible to human senses. The octopus has thousands of suction cups along its arms, each lined with chemoreceptors that allow it to detect the faint chemical signatures of prey hidden beneath sand or deep inside a crevice. It is not simply touching the environment, it is reading it. Once it locates a crab or mollusk, the octopus becomes a sculptor of opportunity. It wraps its arms around the prey, pulling it into a secure grip. If the crab attempts to flee, the octopus counters with flexibility and finesse, bending and twisting its body around the flailing limbs. Other predators must overpower crustaceans with brute strength. The octopus uses precision, control, and a patient grip that denies escape long before the venom enters play. The next move reveals a darker layer of evolutionary innovation. The octopus positions its beak, sharp, curved, and hidden beneath a mass of soft tissue, against the prey's shell. Using a combination of leverage and suction, it stabilizes the crab or snail. Then, with extraordinary delicacy, it begins to drill. The beak and specialized radula rasp against the shell, carving a tiny hole that penetrates the protective barrier. This is not chaotic destruction, but geometric engineering. The hole is small enough to conserve energy, yet large enough to deliver one of the octopus's most potent tools: venom-filled saliva. Once the hole is opened, venom flows through the octopus's salivary glands and into the prey. This venom is a complex cocktail, a blend of neurotoxins, muscle-paralyzing compounds, and enzymes that begin digesting tissues from the inside. The effect on the prey is profound and cruel. The toxins paralyze the crab's claws and walking legs, shutting down neural communication with quiet efficiency. Muscles stop responding not through trauma, but through chemical silence. Nerves flicker and fail. The crab becomes conscious but immobilized, unable to resist as the venom infiltrates deeper into its body. At the same time, digestive enzymes begin their gruesome work. These substances break down muscle fibers, loosen internal organs, and liquefy tissues in preparation for consumption. For the prey, the sensation would be like having its body slowly overwritten. Muscles losing structure, sensory signals fading into darkness, and the boundary between sharp pain and numbness dissolving as paralysis takes hold. To the octopus, however, this method is not cruelty, but practicality. It allows the predator to consume prey too tough for its beak alone. By liquefying parts of the crab internally, the octopus can suck out nutrient-rich tissues without needing to break the shell entirely. The strategy is efficient, effective, and evolutionarily elegant. Yet venom is not equal among octopuses. Some species have mild toxins suited for subduing small crustaceans, while others carry mixtures capable of incapacitating animals far larger than themselves. And within this spectrum of chemical weaponry lies one of the ocean's most extreme outliers: the blue-ringed octopus. Though small enough to sit comfortably in a human palm, this species carries enough tetrodotoxin in its body to shut down breathing in a person within minutes. The venom blocks sodium channels in nerves, preventing electrical signals from reaching muscles, including the diaphragm. The victim remains conscious as paralysis sets in, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to breathe. The blue-ringed octopus is a relative of the common reef octopus, sharing the same family lineage and many of the same predatory principles. Both species inject venom through saliva. Both use neurotoxins to silence prey. Both rely on a combination of intelligence and chemical force to secure meals. The difference is scale. The blue-ringed octopus is a biological anomaly. A tiny creature packed with a dose of venom so potent that it can neutralize animals thousands of times its size. Evolution did not give it this power to intimidate humans. Rather, it uses the same venom to immobilize crabs and small fish with extreme efficiency, eliminating the need for prolonged struggle. Back in the realm of the larger, more commonly seen octopuses, the venomous strategy remains critical to survival. Even species without lethal toxins still rely on chemical subduing to handle armored prey. When an octopus injects venom into a crab, the resulting paralysis is not immediate, but progresses steadily. First, the legs go limp, then the claws remain locked or open uselessly. The crab's muscles begin to lose structure as digestive enzymes break them down. The octopus senses these changes with extraordinary sensitivity, adjusting its grip as the struggle fades. Once the prey is sufficiently liquefied inside, the octopus uses its beak to widen the drilled hole and then extracts the softened tissues. This combination of drilling, injection, and internal digestion places octopuses among the most uniquely adapted predators on the reef. They do not rely on speed like barracudas. They do not rely on mechanical trauma like mantis shrimps. They do not rely on toxic shock like box jellyfish. Their weapon is controlled chemistry deployed with surgical precision. It is a predator's version of quiet power, efficient, silent, and methodical. Beyond their hunting strategy, octopuses also use venom defensively. When cornered or threatened, they may bite attackers, delivering venom that causes intense pain and temporary paralysis. Divers who accidentally place their hands near a hidden octopus often describe the bite as sharp and immediately burning, followed by numbness or tingling that spreads through the affected limb. Although rarely dangerous to humans, except in the case of the blue-ringed species, the bite is a clear warning that the soft-bodied creature has more than flexibility and intelligence in its arsenal. In ecological terms, venom allows octopuses to maintain their role as key predators in reef and coastal ecosystems. Their ability to consume crabs, mollusks, and other armored creatures helps regulate populations and prevent any single species from dominating the benthic environment. By controlling crab populations, they indirectly protect algae grazers. By consuming snails and bivalves, they shape the survival of microhabitats embedded within the reef. Their predatory pressure pushes prey species to evolve tougher shells, faster reflexes, or more advanced defensive behaviors, all of which ripple outward through the food web. Still, the most fascinating dimension of octopus venom is how seamlessly it integrates with the animal's intelligence. Octopuses learn which prey require drilling and which can be subdued more quickly. They adjust their venom dose based on prey size. They explore, test, and refine their technique across their short but cognitively rich lifetimes. Their brains, distributed across their arms and central nervous system, coordinate complex hunting behaviors that combine strength, chemistry, and problem-solving. In the dim corridors of the reef, the octopus remains still after a kill, its body shifting subtly as it draws in the liquefied meal. Its arms curl gently around the shell, securing it until the last nutrients are extracted. Then, with a flex of muscular precision, the creature releases the empty husk, letting it drift away like a discarded husk of a solved puzzle. The octopus slides deeper into its den, disappearing in the same silent, shapeless manner in which it emerged. It carries no armor. It has no bones. It is soft, flexible, and physically fragile. And yet, through venom, intelligence, and a mastery of motion, it becomes one of the ocean's most dominant and efficient predators, rewriting every assumption about what power looks like in nature. In the shallow zones where coral gardens bloom in slow motion and sunlight scatters into prismatic shafts, few predators appear less threatening at first glance than the cuttlefish. Its body resembles a drifting leaf, soft and buoyant, as if carried more by the water's gentle sway than by its own intention. It hovers just above the sand, adjusting tiny fins that ripple along its sides like delicate curtains shaken by a quiet breeze. Its large, domed eyes, unblinking crescents shaped like elegant commas, scan the environment with eerie steadiness. In these calm, pastel-lit shallows, the cuttlefish seems like a passive wanderer, a creature too fragile for conflict and too beautiful for violence. But this softness is a carefully constructed illusion. Beneath the shimmering skin lies an arsenal that blends deception, chemistry, and rapid precision into one of the most elaborate predatory systems in the ocean. The cuttlefish is both artist and assassin, an animal that manipulates color with painterly skill, entrances prey with shifting waves of light, and finishes its hunts with venom that shuts down muscles from the inside. It embodies a unique rule of the reef, one that prey species learn too late. A moment of hesitation, a heartbeat of curiosity, or a single misread signal can spell irreversible doom. To understand the cuttlefish's predatory strategy, begin by observing the skin. It is not merely a protective layer, but a living canvas composed of pigment sacs called chromatophores, structural cells called iridophores, and deeper reflector cells that scatter light. These layers interact with incredible speed. Chromatophores expand or contract to reveal browns, blacks, yellows, and reds. Iridophores manipulate wavelengths of light into shimmering blues and greens. Reflector cells create glowing undertones and sudden flashes of iridescence. Each layer works independently, allowing the cuttlefish to change patterns faster than a human eye can fully register the transition. This is not mimicry for camouflage alone. Though the cuttlefish excels at melting into seagrass beds or coral branches until it becomes indistinguishable from the terrain, it is communication. It is misdirection. And most importantly, it is manipulation. When hunting, the cuttlefish initiates what can only be described as a visual spell. It approaches prey slowly, its movements minimal, its body held steady as the first pulses of color begin to ripple across the skin. These pulses travel horizontally, vertically, or diagonally in mesmerizing sequences that resemble shifting light on water or wind moving across fields of tall grass. To small fish, shrimp, and juvenile crabs, prey that survive by reacting quickly to sudden movement, this display is deeply confusing. Their nervous systems interpret the pulsing waves as environmental noise, not as the approach of a predator. The effect is a breakdown of normal escape responses. The prey freezes, not because it recognizes danger, but because its sensory world becomes overwhelmed and impossible to interpret. Neural pathways responsible for triggering flight flicker with conflicting information. The cuttlefish becomes both present and invisible, a shape obscured by moving patterns that the prey's eyes cannot track. In this trance-like state, the prey drifts from awareness toward vulnerability. Evolution has never provided them with defenses against hypnotic predators because so few animals employ deception with this sophistication. The cuttlefish does not rush. It waits, letting the pulse patterns do their work while it positions itself with slow, calculated precision. Its 8 arms extend slightly, making subtle adjustments to balance. Beneath them, 2 longer tentacles coil inward like tightly wound springs. These tentacles are the cuttlefish's equivalent of a striking snake's body, muscular, flexible, and capable of instant extension. When the moment comes, the shift is instantaneous. The tentacles, hidden until now, shoot forward with astonishing velocity, propelled by elastic energy stored in specialized muscle groups. They extend in a narrow spear-like alignment, their tips lined with suckers that latch onto the prey's body in less than 1/100th of a second. The transition from the hypnotic lull to violent motion is so abrupt that prey rarely even attempt escape. They are caught before cognition can catch up. Once the tentacles hold the prey, the cuttlefish pulls it toward the mouth. Here lies the second stage of the assault, a bite from a sharp, parrot-like beak capable of piercing tough crustacean shells or thick shrimp exoskeletons. But the bite is only the beginning. Along with the physical puncture, the cuttlefish delivers venom-laced saliva that contains neurotoxins and digestive enzymes. These compounds spread quickly through the prey's tissues, shutting down muscle activity and beginning the breakdown of internal organs. To the prey, the transition from visual daze to paralysis is brutally swift. Muscles that moments earlier flexed in response to subtle changes in water currents now fall silent. Legs curl inward. Gills stop moving. Nerves fail to transmit messages from brain to limbs. The body goes limp, not from trauma, but from chemical hijacking. Internally, the digestive enzymes begin dissolving muscle fibers, turning solid tissue into a nutrient-rich slurry the cuttlefish can easily consume. The predator does not need to crush or tear, it simply waits for the venom to soften the meal from the inside. The sensation, if it could be described by the prey, would resemble lights fading out one by one. First movement flickers away, then awareness, then any ability to resist. By the time the cuttlefish begins feeding, the prey's internal structure is collapsing into softness. In the context of reef ecology, this combination of visual hypnosis and venomous precision gives the cuttlefish a unique predatory niche. It is one of the few animals capable of reliably catching fast-reacting prey that normally escape through sudden bursts of movement. Shrimp, for instance, rely on rapid backward flicks of the tail to evade hunters. But a shrimp entranced by pulsing light has no such escape. Small fish, which dart at the faintest hint of a threat, become stationary when their visual field becomes a swirling mosaic of false signals. Even juvenile crabs, armored but slow, find themselves immobilized long before their claws can rise in defense. Because of this, the cuttlefish shapes the structure of small animal communities in the reef. Areas frequented by cuttlefish show lower densities of shrimp and juvenile fish, but higher diversity among organisms that rely on shelter rather than mobility, such as tube worms or buried clams. The predator's reliance on visual manipulation creates evolutionary pressure on prey species to develop erratic movement patterns, unpredictable positioning, or heightened sensitivity to changes in ambient light. Yet no prey species has fully adapted to resist the cuttlefish's hypnotic waves. The display works not through deception alone, but through elementary neurological overload, something evolution struggles to counter. And while the cuttlefish's venom is less notorious than that of sea snakes or box jellyfish, it reveals an intriguing continuity across the cephalopod lineage. The blue-ringed octopus, one of the smallest but most venomous animals in the ocean, uses a similar combination of beak puncture and neurotoxic saliva to shut down muscles and stop breathing. Though cuttlefish do not carry venom nearly as potent, the underlying mechanism is familiar. Immobilization through biochemical assault, delivered after the prey has been physically secured. In the broader story of ocean predators, the cuttlefish occupies an unusual position. It is neither armored nor swift in open water. It cannot chase prey across distance or withstand physical confrontation with large predators. But it dominates through complexity, through the ability to manipulate light, to overload the sensory systems of fish, to reach with tentacles faster than vision can track, and to inject venom that ensures a struggle never lasts more than a few seconds. The reef at dusk becomes a stage where these strategies unfold. As shadows lengthen, the pulsing colors on a cuttlefish's skin glow brighter against the soft blue background. A curious fish swims too close, lulled by the rhythmic flashes that appear harmless. The tentacles strike, the beak pierces, the venom flows. In mere seconds, the prey transitions from entranced observer to dissolving meal. For small reef animals, the cuttlefish enforces one of the most unforgiving rules in the ecosystem. One mistake, one moment of curiosity, one hesitation, and you are gone. And for the cuttlefish, a master of illusions backed by chemistry, that rule defines a quiet reign of exquisite, lethal precision. In the warm shallows where coral heads rise like ancient battlements and the water glows with a clarity rarely seen on land, there moves a creature that defies nearly every defensive strategy the reef has built over millions of years. The Napoleon fish, sometimes called the humphead wrasser, glides through this maze of spines, stings and toxins with the casual confidence of an animal that has learned the ultimate ecological secret. The weapons designed to harm nearly everything else cannot harm it. This immense fish, often growing longer than a person is tall, moves with an elegance that belies its bulk. Its thick, rubbery lips part as it explores the crevices between corals, pushing aside the sharp skeletons with a body built like layered armor. Its scales, large and interlocking, form a living shield that gleams blue, green and turquoise under the sun. But the true marvel lies not in its appearance, nor in its size, but in its astonishing biological immunity. A physiology adapted not for delivering pain, but for simply ignoring it. In a reef dominated by venomous animals, stonefish with their needle spines, sea urchins carrying toxins that burn like fire, and the infamous crown-of-thorns starfish studded with long, venom-laced spikes, the Napoleon fish is an anomaly. It is the predator that looks at nature's most painful warnings and responds with indifference. The day begins in the coral shallows, where young damselfish dart between branches of coral and hermit crabs sift through grains of sand. The Napoleon fish moves slowly, but its pace is deceptive. It is not sluggish, it is deliberate. It knows that everything here has evolved defenses meant to deter exactly this kind of large predator. Yet none of these defenses apply. As the Napoleon fish approaches a crown-of-thorns starfish, an organism feared by nearly every other fish, the starfish stiffens its spines, preparing to inject venom that, for most predators, would cause instant, excruciating harm. The venom is designed to rupture cells, to send waves of burning pain through muscle tissue, to deter even the boldest of attackers. But the Napoleon fish leans forward unbothered. Its fleshy lips, so thick they look almost comical, press against the starfish's spines. These lips act as natural padding, absorbing punctures without allowing them to penetrate deeply. Beneath the lips lies a mouth lining reinforced with mucous membranes that neutralize toxins before they can enter the bloodstream. And beneath that lies a digestive system adapted not just to resist venom, but to dismantle it chemically before it can do damage. With a swift sucking motion, the Napoleon fish grips the crown-of-thorns starfish, crushes part of its body with its powerful jaws, and begins consuming it, piece by venomous piece. The starfish's spines scrape against the fish's mouth, but the predator feels no pain. Enzymes inside the Napoleon fish's stomach immediately begin to break down the toxins, rendering them inert. What should cripple becomes nourishment. What should repel becomes energy. This feeding strategy is not limited to starfish. The Napoleon fish handles all manner of venomous and toxic prey. Juvenile stonefish, already armed with spines capable of causing agony in humans, are swallowed whole. Toxic sea urchins, whose spines would send most fish fleeing in panic, become little more than crunchy morsels. Even bristleworms, which deliver painful stings through tiny hair-like structures, are consumed without hesitation. The Napoleon fish's thick lips and tough mouth lining act as biological gloves, allowing it to grip prey that no other fish would dare touch. This ability shapes its role in the ecosystem in profound ways. While many predators are forced to avoid dangerous species, the Napoleon fish becomes a regulator of organisms that would otherwise grow unchecked. Crown-of-thorns starfish, for example, can devastate coral reefs when their populations explode. They feed by extruding their stomachs over coral surfaces and dissolving the living tissue. When unchecked, they can turn vibrant reef systems into barren wastelands. But with the Napoleon fish present, these starfish are kept in balance. The predator's taste for venomous prey becomes a critical ecological service. In reefs where Napoleon fish populations remain healthy, outbreaks of crown-of-thorns starfish are rare. Where the fish have been hunted or diminished, the starfish flourish, and coral suffers. Thus, the Napoleon fish is not only a marvel of evolutionary adaptation, it is a guardian of reef biodiversity, maintaining a balance that prevents venom-bearing species from overwhelming the environment. The feeding scenes reveal another remarkable adaptation, the crushing power of the jaws. The Napoleon fish possesses pharyngeal teeth deep within its throat, robust grinding plates that pulverize shells, spines, and tough exoskeletons. Even if the outer lips and mouth lining protect the fish from initial contact with toxins, the real destruction happens deeper inside. Once the prey is dragged into the throat, these grinding plates turn armored creatures into digestible fragments in seconds. This mechanical strength paired with chemical immunity, makes the Napoleon fish one of the most versatile and unstoppable omnivores in the shallow reef. This role creates a strange paradox in the world of underwater defenses. Nearly every venomous species in this region has evolved painful weaponry to teach predators a simple lesson: stay away. These defenses are not just biochemical, they are ecological contracts, mechanisms that allow slow-moving, soft-bodied, or stationary creatures to survive in a landscape full of teeth and speed. Venom works for most predators. Stings work for most predators. Pain works for most predators. But the Napoleon fish is the exception that breaks the rule. In a world defined by agony, it is the creature that simply refuses to feel it. The implications ripple outward. Sea urchins become cautious in the presence of a Napoleon fish. Juvenile stonefish change hiding strategies when they detect its shadow. Crown of thorns starfish alter their distribution patterns, avoiding areas where the fish commonly feed. Even other predators behave differently. Sharks sometimes trail Napoleon fish, hoping to scavenge leftovers from their toxic meals. Despite its immunity to venomous prey, the Napoleon fish is not invincible. Large predators like sharks occasionally attempt to prey upon them, but the sheer size and armored scales of a fully grown individual discourage most attacks. Their real vulnerability lies not in nature, but in human activity. Slow reproduction and late maturity make them susceptible to overfishing. As adults, they play irreplaceable roles in reef ecology, and their removal destabilizes ecosystems in ways that become visible only years later. Still, in untouched reefs where their populations remain strong, the Napoleon fish thrives as an evolutionary contradiction. It is gentle in demeanor, but decisive in action, moving with calm certainty through waters filled with defenses that were never designed for a creature like this. It is the quiet breaker of biological rules, the fish that demonstrates an unexpected truth. Sometimes the most powerful adaptation is not a new weapon, but the ability to ignore the weapons of others. As the sun climbs higher and the reef brightens, the Napoleon fish continues its patrol. A sea urchin bristles as the huge shadow approaches, but the display is wasted. The predator dips its head and takes a bite, lips absorbing the sharp spines like rubber cushions. A juvenile stonefish lies buried in the sand, hoping its venom will protect it. It does not. The Napoleon fish uncovers it with a single puff of water and swallows it whole. The crown of thorns starfish retreats clumsily across the coral surface, but there is nowhere far enough to escape. In a world driven by the threat of pain, poison, and paralysis, the Napoleon fish moves untouched, unbothered, and unafraid. It is the final twist in the ocean's long saga of venom, the creature that turns agony back into food. In the open blue, where sunlight filters into the sea in long, trembling columns, and the world feels suspended between weightlessness and silence, the green sea turtle moves with a patience that belongs to ancient things. Its silhouette glides through the water with slow, deliberate strokes, the wide flippers slicing arcs so gentle they barely leave trails behind. Unlike the predators that carve the ocean into territories of fear and speed, the turtle seems almost indifferent to urgency. It does not chase. It does not lunge. Instead, it roams, drifting through ecosystems with the quiet authority of an animal shaped by tens of millions of years of endurance. Ahead of it, something pale and translucent pulses through the water. A jellyfish, its bell undulating like a ghostly heartbeat, trails a curtain of long tentacles that shimmer faintly in the shifting light. To almost every creature in the sea, those tentacles represent a threat. Fine wires lined with microscopic harpoons, each capable of delivering toxins that burn, paralyze, or kill. Even humans, with all their protective technology, treat jellyfish strands with caution, knowing that a single brush can leave a lasting welt. Yet the turtle approaches without changing speed. There is no hesitation, no widening arc of avoidance. It glides straight toward the drifting gelatinous form, as though moving to greet an old familiar companion. As the turtle closes the distance, the jellyfish's tentacles brush across its face and over its front flippers. Nothing happens. The stinging cells, designed to erupt upon contact, bounce harmlessly against the turtle's thick, leathery skin. Then, in one slow but purposeful motion, the turtle opens its wide beak, grips the jellyfish's bell, and begins to swallow it whole. Tentacles that would leave human skin burning slide across the turtle's mouth and down its throat like slippery ribbons. No flinch, no recoil, no sign of discomfort. The turtle continues eating with the steady rhythm of an animal consuming something no more threatening than a strand of algae. There is a biological wonder hidden within this quiet act. The green sea turtle possesses armored defenses that were not designed for battle or aggression, but for neutralizing one of the ocean's most efficient deterrents, the sting. Inside its mouth, thick layers of skin line the jaws and palate, forming a protective cushion that prevents nematocysts, the stinging cells, from penetrating deeply. These layers are reinforced by tough keratin ridges that act like gripping tools, allowing the turtle to hold gelatinous prey without tearing its own tissues. But the real miracle unfolds deeper in the throat. The turtle's esophagus is lined with papillae, sharp, backward-pointing keratin spikes that guide slippery prey downward. These papillae are covered in a mucus layer so dense and resilient that the stinging cells cannot activate or embed properly. It is an evolutionary marriage of texture and chemistry. The spikes ensure that jellyfish cannot escape once swallowed. The mucus protects the turtle from the jellyfish's chemical arsenal. Together, they transform an organism built on defense into nothing more than soft nutrition. From an ecological perspective, this tolerance is transformative. Jellyfish are among the most resilient and opportunistic creatures in the ocean. Their populations can explode under the right conditions: warm waters, declining predators, nutrient-rich currents, and when they do, the effects are profound. Jellyfish consume zooplankton that many juvenile fish depend on. They clog fishing nets. They displace small fish species. They alter energy flows in entire ecosystems. A jellyfish bloom is not merely an inconvenience, it is a reconfiguration of the food web. Green sea turtles, particularly juveniles and subadults, step into this chaos with a feeding strategy that exerts control without aggression. They consume vast quantities of jellyfish, often focusing on species that other predators avoid. They do not chase them in rapid bursts, but instead graze through blooms in slow arcs that can last hours. Each mouthful removes dozens of tentacles and digestive chambers filled with concentrated nutrients. For the turtle, these drifting organisms become easy calories. High water content, yes, but also a ready source of energy, fat, and micronutrients. For the reef and open water systems, this grazing helps stabilize populations that would otherwise surge unchecked. In some regions, juvenile turtles develop seasonal feeding circuits that follow jellyfish migration patterns. They drift along coastlines where warm currents concentrate blooms, then shift offshore when open water aggregations form. Their movements create a soft biological counterweight to jellyfish expansion. It is not predation in the dramatic sense, no chase, no violence, but it is predation nonetheless, shaped by an evolutionary advantage that renders stings meaningless. Yet the turtle's immunity to stings is not absolute. Some species of jellyfish, such as the box jellyfish, possess venom capable of inflicting extreme cellular damage. The turtle's defenses significantly reduce the impact, but may not render the animal completely immune to every species. Still, the tolerance is extraordinary. It is a functional advantage that transforms the turtle into one of the ocean's few creatures that can convert venom-based defenses into reliable food sources. The visual of a turtle feeding on jellyfish carries an almost poetic contradiction. The jellyfish, with its tentacles extended in a floating halo of deadly threads, presents a threat designed to repel anything with a heartbeat. The turtle, drifting closer with serene confidence, responds to this display by casually folding the jellyfish into its mouth like a soft, edible cloth. The moment feels as though two evolutionary narratives are colliding, one built on inflicting pain, the other built on ignoring it entirely. This adaptation also speaks to the turtle's broader resilience. Green sea turtles are herbivorous as adults, grazing on seagrass meadows that require regular trimming to remain healthy. But in their juvenile and subadult stages, they are omnivorous, consuming jellyfish, mollusks, sponges, and even carrion. Their ability to switch diets throughout life allows them to inhabit multiple ecosystems and control multiple prey populations. The turtle's tolerance for jellyfish stings is not a quirky accident. It is a survival tool forged through millions of years of environmental shifts. The sensory adaptations that accompany this tolerance are equally fascinating. Unlike many predators, turtles do not rely on rapid bursts of motion or sharp vision to catch prey. Instead, they use a combination of smell, touch, and low-light vision to locate gelatinous organisms. Their eyes are adapted to detect contrast and motion in turbid water, allowing them to recognize the shimmering movements of jellyfish bells from meters away. Their sense of touch, transmitted through the leathery skin around their faces, helps them assess the shape and orientation of prey even as it drifts unpredictably. And their slow, unhurried swimming minimizes water disturbance, allowing them to approach prey without triggering defensive contractions. All these adaptations combine to create a feeding strategy that looks deceptively simple, but is biologically complex. The turtle is not merely immune to stings, it is strategically built to turn venomous organisms into fuel. As the sun rises higher, illuminating the water in bands of gold, the green sea turtle continues its steady glide. Another jellyfish drifts upward along a warm current. Its tentacles expand like a translucent crown. The turtle approaches, undeterred, and takes it into its beak. The draped tentacles trail behind the turtle like frayed threads, then vanish as they follow the jellyfish deep into the turtle's throat. In less than a minute, the organism that could bring a human to tears becomes nothing more than a soft pulse of energy inside the turtle's body. In a world defined by stings and venom, where pain ensures survival and paralysis protects the weak, the green sea turtle represents a rare evolutionary reversal. It does not counter venom with greater venom. It does not fight pain with armor or aggression. Instead, it carries a biological calm, a physiological indifference that transforms danger into nourishment, turning weapons meant to inflict agony into nothing more than slippery calories drifting in the blue. And with every jellyfish it consumes, the turtle helps hold the balance of the sea, proving that sometimes the most powerful response to pain is the ability to feel none at all. In the bright shallows where sunlight fractures into ribbons and the sea's surface glitters like hammered glass, a pod of dolphins gathers with an energy that feels different from the routine rhythm of hunting or traveling. Their movements are deliberate but unhurried, a choreographed drift rather than a coordinated chase. The water here is warm and still, carrying only the faintest pulse of the open ocean. Beneath the pod, a small rounded shape floats upward from a patch of seagrass. Its body is smooth and swollen, the skin mottled in pale yellows and browns. Dormant but unmistakable, a pufferfish suspended in the gentle sway of the tide. The first dolphin approaches with a subtle shift of its flippers, gliding in a way that barely disturbs the suspended silt. There is no predatory angle here, no tension, no tightening of muscles, no rush toward the target. Instead, the dolphin uses the tip of its beak to nudge the puffer with the kind of precision usually reserved for inspecting newborn calves. At the contact, the fish jolts in reflexive panic, inflating instantly into its iconic spherical shape. The dolphin seems unconcerned by the sudden transformation. Instead, it rolls half onto its side and holds the puffer gently against the surface with a soft, controlled nudge. For a moment, nothing happens. Then the dolphin opens its mouth just slightly and clamps down with a pressure so carefully measured that the teeth barely indent the puffer's rubbery skin. A single squeeze, gentle but firm. The fish releases a faint cloud of tetrodotoxin-laced mucus. In lethal concentrations, this substance can shut down nerves, silence muscles, and end life in breaths. But here the dolphin's restraint ensures only a trace escapes, far below the threshold of danger. What follows is one of the more peculiar scenes seen in marine life. The dolphin holds the puffer for a few seconds, then lets it drift upward, rising like a balloon freed from a child's hand. The dolphin remains near it, hovering as if evaluating some internal shift, before nudging the puffer toward another member of the pod. A second dolphin intercepts it with the same meticulous care, repeating the ritual with almost identical precision. A third follows, and then a fourth. The puffer bobs and spins between them like a buoy drifting through a field of grey-blue shadows. This strange behavior has been recorded in several populations, often involving juveniles, but appearing sometimes in adults as well. The footage, when examined frame by frame, carries no sign of aggression or hunting intent. Instead, it resembles a kind of deliberate experimentation. The dolphins press the fish, release it, pass it around, and then drift together in a loosely formed circle. Their movements begin to slow, not out of fatigue, but as though guided by a different rhythm. Their eyes half-lit, jaws loosen slightly, and their swimming shifts from purposeful arcs to broad, languid sweeps. The pod begins to float near the surface in a lazy spiral, bodies brushing against each other like companions sharing a quiet secret. Scientists studying these interactions have proposed a hypothesis that is both simple and astonishing: that dolphins may be dosing themselves with trace amounts of tetrodotoxin, enough to induce altered sensory states, but not enough to cause harm. The behaviors that follow, calm drifting, slow rotations, apparent disinterest in external stimuli, have been described as trance-like. To see a group of apex predators, creatures built on speed, intelligence, and calculated coordination, suddenly hovering in dreamy suspension, is to witness something fundamentally different from survival behavior. The possibility that dolphins, among the most intelligent non-human animals, might intentionally use another species' venom for sensation remains a frontier of research. It challenges assumptions about tool use, risk-taking, and even recreational behavior among marine mammals. If true, it suggests a remarkable level of understanding that these dolphins recognize both the danger and the precise threshold of safety. But the story becomes richer when we shift from the behavior itself to the biology that enables it. Tetrodotoxin is a neurotoxin far more potent than cyanide, acting by binding to sodium channels in nerve membranes. When these channels cannot open, neurons fail to fire, muscles fail to contract, and the entire communication system of a body begins shutting down. In fish and invertebrates, tetrodotoxin acts quickly, freezing their movement long enough for predators, usually not dolphins, to swallow them with minimal resistance. In humans, even minute doses can cause tingling, followed by numbness, followed by paralysis that creeps from limbs to lungs. Yet in these dolphin interactions, none of that catastrophe unfolds. The dolphins appear fully aware of how much pressure they can apply without injuring the puffer or releasing lethal concentrations. Their mouths never snap, they never bite deeply, they never crush the fish, a restraint entirely unlike predation. Some observers have noted that dolphins even handle puffers differently from the way they handle other prey, keeping movements delicate and measured, as though performing a practiced ritual with known boundaries. The puffer's inflation mechanism, usually a defense against predators, has become part of the dolphin's game. When inflated, the puffer's body becomes more buoyant and easier to pass around. The fish, though stressed, is often released alive after the activity ends. This survival suggests the dolphins are not motivated by hunger or aggression, but curiosity, sensation, or social bonding. The ecological implications of this behavior are subtle but worth exploring. Predators often learn to avoid venomous species through painful mistakes. Dolphins, however, seem to have found a controlled way to explore the boundary of that danger. They do not disable the puffer. They do not swallow it. They manipulate it with the same precision they use when teaching calves to handle fragile objects or when passing pieces of coral during social displays. Their behavior suggests not only intelligence, but deliberate experimentation. And this experimentation may play a role in social development. Young dolphins often imitate adults, exploring controlled risks under the watchful eyes of the pod. Handling a puffer may become a kind of neurological puzzle. How to apply just enough force, how to position the object, how to keep the toxin dosage minimal but perceivable. In a species where learning shapes much of predatory behavior, coordinated hunts, cooperative strategies, mimicry of fish schools, such activities may serve cognitive or social purposes far beyond sensory alteration. From the perspective of the pufferfish, the interaction is a near constant state of stress, yet it rarely ends fatally. The puffer's venom, honed through evolutionary pressure to deter or kill predators, becomes a tool in the hands, really the mouths, of animals that have learned how to house it without triggering its full destructive potential. In evolutionary terms, this represents a curious inversion. A defense mechanism designed to prevent consumption has become repurposed as a stimulant, a natural chemical artifact that no longer guarantees safety, but instead invites interaction. Yet the dolphin's relationship with venom ends at sensation. They never escalate the interaction toward harm. This clarity of boundary showcases a high degree of self-control. In any other predator, a small miscalculation could mean death, but dolphins, despite their speed and formidable jaws, maintain a gentle mastery. They understand the fine line between play and peril. The rest of the ocean offers no parallel. No other marine predator has been seen treating venom as a recreational substance. Lions do not tease cobras for dosage. Wolves do not nip toxic toads with measured restraint. Sharks do not seek out electric eels for controlled shocks. Only dolphins, with their combination of cognition, social learning, and exploratory behavior, appear willing to engage in these biochemical experiments for reasons beyond necessity. Watching the pod drifting in their slow spiral, the chemical haze diluted through seawater, it becomes clear that this is the culmination of a theme running through all of marine evolution, that the ocean is a place of adaptation so varied that even its weapons can be repurposed. Jellyfish stings become food for turtles. Stonefish venom becomes lunch for Napoleon fish. And here, tetrodotoxin becomes something else entirely. Neither strictly weapon nor strictly defense, but something hovering between sensation and tool. Dolphins, creatures known for orchestrated hunts, complex communication, and problem-solving, reveal yet another dimension of intelligence: the ability to use another animal's biology for purposes outside the standard predator-prey dynamic. It is not about agony or subduing prey. It is about altering perception, about shared experience, about exploring the boundaries of sensation in a way no other ocean predator has been observed doing. When the drifting trance finally ends and the pod shakes itself back into coordinated motion, the puffer is released to the tide, deflating slowly as it sinks toward the seagrass. The dolphins regroup, accelerating into the deeper blue with the sudden, effortless agility that defines them. The experiment is over, until the next opportunity drifts by, puffed up and bristling, carrying one of the ocean's most famous toxins inside a body that has accidentally become part of a social ritual. In a world where venom usually ends life, the dolphins have turned it into something else: a moment of shared curiosity, a calculated dance with chemical danger, and a demonstration of intelligence that pushes beyond survival into something more nuanced, more mysterious, and far more revealing of the ocean's endlessly inventive living strategies.